My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226 Chaos. During this time, the Balkans were turbulent. Not to mention the war between the Ottomans and Italy. This war is seen by many as a war between the weakest power and the strongest subpower. Many people feel that this war needs to be fought for at least a year and a half before it is possible to see the outcome point, but they soon learned that the text had been misjudged, because during the Italian-Turkish War, other countries joined in. The first one to make a statement was the Grand Duchy of Montenegro. On the third day after Italy landed on Crete, Grand Duke Nicholas I of Montenegro declared a state of war with the Ottoman Empire. The next day, the 14,000 Montenegrin troops, who had already completed their general mobilization, invaded Ottoman territory under the leadership of the Grand Duke. Such quick action, without any sloppiness, is the norm in the battle between Montenegro and the Ottomans. The greatest interest and hobby of this country, that developed entirely around Cetinges to fight against the Ottoman Empire. In this Italian-Turkish war, if Italy had not asked him to slow down, he might have also fought against the Ottoman Empire on the day Italy declared war. Then war was declared. Of course, Montenegro had his own reasons for being so enthusiastic about dealing with Osman. Montenegro is basically a mountainous area, and the local products are not rich enough, so many Montenegrins have started businesses without capital. After the establishment of the Grand Duchy of Montenegro, King Nicholas I felt that continuing like this was not an option, so he organized his lawless mountain people to beg for food from their wealthy neighbors next door. But when he made his neighbor furious and wanted to beat him, he retreated, fortified the wall and cleared the field. He was so poor that he couldn't grab it, even if he wanted to, and returned to Cetinge to stick to it. If you look at it, you will know that that place is absolutely disgusting. People, no matter how many people there are, it's useless. The Ottomans were disgusted by such shameless neighbors who could not be beaten, and who would come to your house to drop by and take things when they had nothing to do. Of course, the Montenegrins also know that they can't make too many enemies, so they won't rob anyone around them, but they will rob you, Osman. This move also received praise from other countries, giving the Montenegrins a good reputation in the Christian world. So didn't this pay off? The Grand Duchy of Montenegro, which was only 8,000 square kilometers, won the friendship of the Kingdom of Italy and became an ally. Since it was an ally and an ally against the Ottomans, Montenegro was even more enthusiastic and mobilized an army of 14,000 people, which was impossible before. The ability to mobilize so many people this time was thanks to the help of their ally Italy, which sent them guns and food, allowing them to unleash their maximum mobilization capabilities. Of course, no matter how much Montenegro mobilizes, it still cannot achieve the situation that makes Istanbul look at it. In fact, the problem is on the Bulgarian side. At the request of Ottoman Minister of War Osman Nuri Pasha, the Ottoman government extended goodwill to Bulgaria. For this reason, the Ottoman foreign minister even told the Bulgarian envoy privately that the Ottomans plan to divide the Macedonian region into two and give it to Bulgaria. Of course, it is impossible for Bulgaria to win half of Macedonia for free. For this reason, Halim Pasha gave a condition, that is, Bulgaria must fight with the Ottomans to resist the Italian attack. Bulgaria only needs to send 50,000 troops. No matter what the final result is, the Ottoman Empire will give half of Macedonian territory to Bulgaria. To be honest, when the news was sent back to Sofia, many people in Bulgaria were shaken. One side must participate in the war with all its strength, and only by winning can it obtain North Macedonia, while the other side only needs to send 50,000 troops to obtain half of Macedonia. This choice is too good. This situation also affected the new king. King Ferdinand I of Bulgaria summoned the prime minister for this purpose to test his tone and whether the Ottoman conditions should be considered. Facing the king's temptation, Prime Minister Stambolov was worthy of being Bulgaria's Bismarck. He saw at a glance that this was just a delaying tactic by the Ottoman Empire, and he dissuaded the king with righteous words. There is no free lunch in the world. If Osman can offer such generous conditions, whether it can be implemented will be a big problem. And if Bulgaria makes hasty moves, it is very likely that it will get nothing in the future. In addition, in the Macedonian region, this is related to the strength of the Ottomans in Europe. It is very unrealistic for them to give half of it to Bulgaria. After Prime Minister Stambolov's persuasion, King Ferdinand I gave up this idea. However, the resuppression and integration of internal differences delayed Bulgaria for an additional 4 or 5 days. At this time, a piece of intelligence was obtained, and Bulgaria realized that this was just a ploy by the Ottoman Empire to delay them. Bulgarian spies obtained a piece of intelligence from a confidential staff officer of the Ottoman 8th Army transferred from Asia. The intelligence showed that the destination of the Ottoman 8th Army was Adrianople, where they would stand firm to prevent Bulgaria's attack. This piece of information made the Bulgarians immediately realize that this was just a delaying tactic by the Ottoman Empire. And another ally, Montenegro, has declared war on the Ottomans. Faced with this situation, the Bulgarians, who were deeply afraid that their future victories would be greatly compromised by long nights and dreams, also issued a declaration of war against the Ottoman Empire 2 days after Montenegro declared war. With Bulgaria's declaration of war, the Ottoman Empire's military was troubled because it had not been a week and the troops were not yet in place. But now that the Bulgarians have declared war, they can only find a way quickly. At present, in addition to asking the troops to speed up their march, the only option is to rush the troops in the Thrace passage to the key points to build fortifications. Of course, faced with the Ottoman army's remedies, the Bulgarians would not just look at it like this. On the day after the declaration of war, 70,000 people from the Bulgarian First Army crossed the border and attacked Komodini. This city is the key city with the narrowest passage in Thrace. It can mainly capture the city of Komodini. It can block the coastal passage of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire also knew this, so the city currently has more than 30,000 troops stationed in the city. They chose to stay and wait for reinforcement to arrive. The Bulgarian offensive is not limited to this route. The Bulgarian Second Army started from Prokhodiv and attacked Adrianople along the Maritsa Valley. Their mission was to contain the enemies in Istanbul and capture Como for the First Army. Dini creates the conditions. In addition, the Third Army also crossed the border and attacked Kilkis along the Struma Valley, because behind Kilkis is Salonika, the largest port city in Macedonia, which can allow. They were supported by allies. The total strength of these three armies is as high as 165,000. In addition, Bulgaria also mobilized 50,000 to 60,000 to defend its homeland. It can be said that Bulgaria used all its strength for this war. Don't talk about Bulgaria's mobilization of nearly 1 million troops in World War I. Times are different, so are their mobilization capabilities, and that was more than 3 years of total mobilization. The participation of Bulgaria and Montenegro in the war made Carlo in Rome extremely happy. In order to prevent the war from falling into a stalemate, the allies he chose were also powerful. Bulgaria, with a population of more than 3.2 million, has excellent mobilization capabilities. Of course, Montenegro is not bad either. After all, Montenegro has less than 200,000 people in the country. But just as Carlo was looking at the map happily, the captain of the guard, Filmaki, ran in with an anxious look on his face, holding a telegram. "Your Majesty, urgent telegram." Facing the look and conversation of the captain of the guard, Carlo felt that something must have happened beyond his control. He took the telegram and read it at a glance. The more he read, the angrier he became. After reading a telegram, Carlo threw it to the ground. Damn these damn speculators. Chapter 227. It's complicated. What made Carlo so discolored was actually nothing. On the third day after Bulgaria declared war on the Ottoman Empire, Greece and Serbia also declared war on the Ottoman Empire. People who don't understand may say, isn't this a good thing? There are 2 more enemies to deal with. Osman. When you hear this, you will know that you are ignorant of politics, because it means that the situation is out of control. Greece and Serbia are very involved, making the war suddenly have an extra side point in a battle situation, where the 2 camps were originally clearly divided. A third party suddenly appeared. How could we fight this? Although Greece and Serbia declared war on the Ottomans, everyone knew that they did not belong to Italy's side because they had not talked with Italy at all. This is very embarrassing. 2 uninvited guests have entered the current war, causing inexplicable changes in the war situation. The more critical thing is that this plan to carve up the cake from the Ottoman Empire was obviously prepared by Italy. What does it mean to suddenly have 2 uninvited guests? However, it is not easy to drive away these 2 countries with Italy's strength because there are other countries behind it. If it weren't for the 2 figures standing behind him, Carlo could responsibly say that for Serbia and Greece, even one of them wouldn't be enough to beat Italy with one hand. Because these 2 small countries have less than 5 million people, what can they do to compete with Italy? Send in the British and Russian ambassadors immediately. I have something to do and need to summon them. Following Carlo's words, the originally simple Italian-Turkish war in the Balkans rapidly expanded and has now become a vortex involving the situation of major European countries. When Carlo was angry about the 2 Balkan countries, some people in St. Petersburg were also angry about it. Damn it, why did these Serbs act like this? Why didn't we receive the news in advance? Gorkakov was derelict in his duties, and our ambassador to Serbia is even more deaf and blind. The one who was roaring violently was Tsar Alexander III. The Russian's little father was now in a furious mood because of the Serbians' actions. Faced with the wrath of His Majesty the Tsar, Geremakin, as Prime Minister, could only bow his head and remain silent in the face of such a scene. The Tsar was right about this. The Serbians privately declared war on the Ottomans this time, which indeed disgusted Russia. To put it bluntly, the Serbs, as pawns, acted privately and caused trouble for Big Brother. Although Russia has not yet made a corresponding decision on the war with Italy and Turkey, no one among the top Russian officials would scold Serbia for forcibly siding with Russia. However, despite the criticism, the problem still needs to be solved. After all, Serbia is still a good little brother. It is a nail stuck in the Balkan Peninsula by Russia. It cannot let go, especially when Russia and Bulgaria have drifted apart. Your Majesty, we should still consider how to deal with the aftermath. After the Tsar finished scolding, Geremakin, as the Prime Minister of the government, spoke about the most important things at present. Yes, even if the Serbians set the trap, Russia, as the big brother, must find a way to make up for it. After all, Serbia is related to Russia's layout in the Balkans, so it is impossible to just let it go. And Alexander III also knew this, so he scolded the Serbs. If he had little to do with Russia, how could he be so angry? After taking several deep breaths, Alexander III looked at the Prime Minister in front of him and asked, "What measures does your government have in place?" Your Majesty, the government's approach is to first endorse the Serbian declaration of war, or at least express acquiescence. In addition, given that Serbia and the Ottomans are at war, our country can support them with a batch of weapons. Prime Minister Geremakin's words made Alexander III a little dissatisfied. He looked at his Prime Minister and continued to ask, "That's it? Of course, there was more, but considering that His Majesty the Tsar was not in a good mood before, Geremakin did not finish his words. But now facing the Tsar's inquiry, he had no choice but to keep the whole plan out. In addition, the military in Ukraine is allowed to conduct exercises to deter other countries from joining. In addition, Serbia, which secretly launches a war, cannot be spared. Kiriyenko, who serves as ambassador in Belgrade, has seriously neglected his duty this time and transferred him. Come back, and after this war is over, we will give warnings and punishments to the Serbs." Obviously, as Russia's Prime Minister, Geremakin first needs to consider Russia's interests. At a time when he could be dragged into the water at any time, he couldn't punish the Serbs first. We can only give priority to ensuring that it is not attacked by the Ottomans or other countries, and then wait until the war is over before we can talk about punishment. Faced with the method given by Geremakin, Alexander III felt that there was nothing wrong with it and spoke. "Then follow this method, but you must warn the Serbs that, if it happens again, the empire will reconsider the relationship between the 2 countries. Our country will not allow such a situation to happen again. This is the first and last time. It was obvious that, although he was unwilling to do so, Alexander III acquiesced in the Prime Minister's approach. Point of course, compared with the Russians' actions for the Serbians, who could only acquiesce after being furious, the British Empire was much calmer. Tell Trikoupis, the Greek, that we are very disappointed with his actions, and that the British Empire will provide absolutely no help in this regard. Looking at the Greek ambassador in front of him, Cecil, who was the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary of the British Empire, said these words expressionlessly. Facing his words, the Greek ambassador in front of him felt hot, because his words also represent the attitude of the British Empire towards Greece this time. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, our country sincerely means no offense. This time, the war between Italy and Turkey in the Balkans has devastated life in the region, and with the participation of Bulgaria, the situation in the Balkans is facing a reshuffle. Our country is really unwilling to see the local situation deteriorate. So I had to take this step. In addition, I heard that, in order to bring Bulgaria into the war, the Italians offered generous conditions to allow it to annex the Macedonian region. This will seriously affect the balance of power in the region, so our country can't wait to prevent this from happening. Well, in front of the famous Prime Minister of the British Empire, the Greek ambassador did not dare to play any tricks and directly eliminated all Greece's concerns about this war. Facing the Greek ambassador's words, Prime Minister Cecil said, after looking at the other party, although our country will not provide much help, it can still ensure the safety of the Greek territory. In addition, although our country cannot provide help, I believe that, if your country contacts arms dealers, for the sake of money, they will quickly provide a batch of arms. Such straightforward words have shown the British Empire's attitude. If the Greek ambassador still doesn't understand, there is really nothing that can be done. In fact, the Greek ambassador understood what Prime Minister Cecil said very clearly. He said with a happy face, "Thank you for the British support for our country. I will send a telegram to the country right now." Seeing the teachable look of the Greek ambassador, Cecil nodded with satisfaction and sent him away. When he was alone in the office, Prime Minister Cecil immediately showed disdain. Don't think that he doesn't know that it was these Greeks who caused the situation in the Balkans to become like this. Of course, he did not deny that the Greek ambassador just now was right. This Italian-Turkish war really cannot go too smoothly for the Italians. Only by muddying the waters can the situation be exciting. Chapter 228 Complex Response. Although Britain and Russia reacted to the actions of Serbia and Greece respectively, the reactions were actually not very violent. But when it comes to the sudden appearance of Serbia and Greece to disrupt the situation, apart from Italy, which reacted the most fiercely, Bulgaria reacted fiercely, or in other words, even more fiercely than Italy. In Sofia, an equally heated meeting unfolded. The actions of Serbia and Greece this time are definitely a conspiracy against our country. They do not want to see our country acquire the Macedonian region, so they colluded and used this method to embarrass our country. In a meeting held by King Ferdinand I, Stambulov, as Prime Minister, spoke impassionately about his views on the sudden intervention of the two countries. His views attracted the approval of others, among whom Grekov, the Foreign Minister, even praised loudly. The Prime Minister is right. The purpose of the two countries this time is definitely not to make things easier for our country. They do not want to see our country regain Macedonia. Of course, the Bulgarians themselves have their own considerations that lead to such a one-sided attitude in Bulgaria. Prior to this, although Bulgaria and Sechi were constantly at odds, they also cooperated in the confrontation. The reason was the ownership of the Macedonian region and the Ottomans, the territories of Greater Bulgaria, Greater Serbia, and Greater Greece, that the three countries each promote include the Macedonian region. This is the reason why the three countries are in constant trouble, because these three countries are in a competitive relationship and they all have intentions for the Macedonian region. However, because the Ottoman power that occupied Macedonia was too strong for them to shake alone, cooperation became possible. Therefore, under this kind of relationship, the situation between the three countries is extremely complicated. Maybe two countries are fighting against one country today, and allies and opponents will be changed again due to other reasons tomorrow. Of course, this situation would have lasted for a long time had Italy not intervened. until the three countries felt that they could shake the Ottoman Empire with their own power, they would consider taking action against it. Of course, Greece, which was the most impatient later, tried once, but after being beaten all over the head by the Ottomans, it made the other two countries know that they could not act alone, and only later did they unite for the Balkan War. As for now, due to Carlo's changes to Italy, Bulgaria has now stood out from its original not so leading position. It would be strange if the other two countries did not jump in point, but Bulgaria did not take this to heart because they felt that they really made a profit this time. If you can find a strong ally and don't have any ambitions towards Macedonia, you'll have made a profit, no matter how you look at it. That's why they were so angry at the two countries that suddenly jumped into the war, which made it clear that they did not want to see Bulgaria occupy Macedonia. Of course, although the Bulgarians are very angry, they still retain their sense, otherwise they would not discuss the issue of the two countries' participation in the war in Sofia. Facing the passionate officials, Ferdinand, the King of Bulgaria, spoke. Prime Minister, what do you mean? Ferdinand, who was born into the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha-Kohari family, has served as the King of Bulgaria for several years, but the real power in Bulgaria is currently in the hands of the Prime Minister. And when he asked this question, he also wanted to hear the Prime Minister's opinion. Of course, his words also made other officials pay attention to his Prime Minister to see what good suggestions the Prime Minister in charge of Bulgaria had. Facing the eyes of the king and other officials, how could Stambolov, as the Prime Minister, have no idea? He said confidently, Your Majesty, colleagues, at this time, our first priority is still to complete the next operation, to block the Thrace passage. Of course, we also need to ask about the intentions of our allies. Of course, Your Majesty's relationship with Austria-Hungary is our way out. Yes, in this complicated environment, it is useless for Bulgaria to be anxious. The primary goal must be clear, and the rest depends more on Italy, its ally. Of course, the Prime Minister has not forgotten the role of his own king. At this time, relying on this well-born king may yield unexpected gains. Stambolov's words made everyone present nod secretly. He was worthy of being the Prime Minister of Bulgaria. He thought of a solution within a short period of time. Of course, more people are turning their attention to the king, hoping that he can stand up for the interests of Bulgaria. Ferdinand I certainly knew what they were expecting, and the Prime Minister's advice was very beneficial to him. After all, this was the first time in a short time that he had participated significantly in Bulgarian political events, which was very good for improving his prestige. Since the Prime Minister has said so, I will take the Foreign Secretary to Vienna and Berlin. The words of King Ferdinand I immediately filled the audience with praise. Compliments such as His Majesty's wisdom were uttered as if they were free of charge. Of course, Ferdinand himself knew how many of them were just talking casually. When Bulgaria was discussing countermeasures against Serbia and Greece, there was actually another country that reacted equally fiercely, and that was Austria-Hungary. In Vienna, an Austro-Hungarian conference was being held here. The issues discussed also came from Seth's questions. Your Majesty, everyone, this action by Serbia and Greece has a very big impact. The telegram from Italy is asking about our attitude, as the Austro-Hungarian Empire's foreign minister and chairman of the Council of Ministers, Count Gustavus Karnokai, stated the theme of this meeting in front of the emperor and important ministers. Of course, the telegram sent by Italy was just an introduction. It was more about considering Austria-Hungary's own interests in this war. When Count Karnokai finished speaking, the Austrian Prime Minister Count Edward Taaffe next to him spoke. I think our country needs to pay enough attention to the current war in the Balkans, because it is crucial for our country to expand its influence in the Balkan map. Because the current war is suspected of being out of control, I think that at present it's best not to intervene, but we can provide more assistance to our possible allies. Obviously, the Austrian Prime Minister did not want Austria-Hungary to rashly intervene in this war. What Count Taaffe said is correct, and I agree with it very much. The person who spoke this time was Hungarian Prime Minister Tisza Kalman. This Prime Minister in charge of the Kingdom of Hungary is very famous in Hungary. Therefore, his words basically represent the attitude of the Kingdom of Hungary. Faced with the words of the two kingdom prime ministers, Count Konoki, the first person in the imperial government, shook his head and said, I very much agree with both of you. Of course I don't want to bring Austria-Hungary into this war, but I think the Bosnian issue cannot be delayed any longer. Having said this, Count Konoki turned his head to Tissa Kalman, the Hungarian Prime Minister. Because of this Prime Minister's obstruction, the Austro-Hungarian Empire has been unable to reach a resolution. To annex Bosnia and Herzegovina. It needs to be explained here that the Austro-Hungarian dualist empire requires the unanimous approval of the prime ministers of the two kingdoms when making major external decisions. Doesn't this feel incredible? There was no way around it. During the European Revolution of 1848 and the subsequent formation of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, such a decision had to be made. In order to gain the support of the Hungarians, this also led to a great increase in the power of the Hungarians in the empire, and any resolution that might threaten their status would be strongly opposed by them. The annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the eyes of the Hungarians, is a threat to their political status. Because there is a large Serbian population in the area, especially after annexing this region, the proportion of Serbian people in the country will reach the top 3. If the Kingdom of Serbia is annexed, its population will be about the same as that of Hungary. In this case, his status in the empire will also be greatly reduced. So this is a reason for the Hungarians' opposition. Faced with the gaze cast by Count Konoki, Hungarian Prime Minister Tissa Kalman simply ignored it. Seeing that the other party was not understanding, Count Konoki could only turn his attention to Emperor Joseph. As the emperor, Franz Joseph I certainly knew what this meant. At this time, he had to take action himself, otherwise the Bosnian issue would never be resolved, which would seriously affect Austria-Hungary's interests. Tissa Kalman, I assure you that the status of the Hungarians will not be diminished. Although Tissa Kalman was unwilling to face the emperor's words, he could only choose to acquiesce after several inner struggles in the face of the emperor's gaze. Then let's do it according to His Majesty's wishes. We in the Kingdom of Hungary respect His Majesty's opinions. Well, now the biggest problem has finally been solved. Next, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to the Ottoman Empire, demanding that the other party must give an answer to the Bosnian issue. Facing the Ottoman Empire, which had already been in extreme difficulties, the pressure from Austria-Hungary left them with no ability to refuse, and could only agree. Of course, they didn't gain anything. The benevolent Austria-Hungary Empire still spent £2.4 million to compensate the region. However, this money will not have much effect on the current war situation. Of course, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, which further increased the turmoil in the Balkans, and made the situation develop in an unpredictable direction. Chapter 229. Adding insult to injury. In the world-famous Istanbul, there have been few pedestrians recently, and even the pedestrians on the road are in a hurry. There is no way. The empire is in some difficulties now, so as a person in the capital, it is natural to feel the danger of the situation. Of course, in addition to this, the spies who have been running rampant recently are a bit arrogant, which is also one of the reasons why people in the capital are reluctant to go out. Some time ago, there were several daring people who objected to the imperial government's improper handling of this war, and were subsequently arrested and imprisoned. Logically speaking, the arrest of a few people should not be widely known. The problem is that these people are very well known in the empire, so they obviously made a fuss. Of course, no matter how much trouble is made, it will not affect the overall situation of the empire. But to say where is the busiest place in Istanbul right now, it has to be the Ministry of War. The War Department located on Suman the Great Street was bustling with people. Even though it was close to evening, people were still coming and going. The current war has made the Army Department very busy. Whether it is troop deployment, material supply, troop recruitment and other tasks, this brain needs to be fully operational. As the brain in the brain, Minister of War Nuri Pasha is naturally busier. Many things require his signature and approval, and these are all important issues, and cannot be careless at all. Therefore, during this period of time, the old marshal basically lived in the Ministry of War and rarely even went back home. When I feel tired, I lie down on the camp bed in my office for a while, then get up and continue working. This kind of life made the old marshal who was originally a little fat, lose several pounds in less than half a month. But even so, Marshal Nuri Pasha was still worried about the Ottoman army. Send a telegram to Lieutenant General Heman Pasha, asking him to pay close attention to the actions of the Greeks, and allow him to retreat to Salonika with the 12th Army. If there is a large-scale attack, the 12th Army mentioned by Nuri Pasha is a newly formed unit by the Ottomans this year. It has 3 divisions: 47, 49, and 64. It can be seen from the number of this unit that it is mainly composed of new soldiers and ranks second in combat effectiveness. The troops at the end point their previous mission was to monitor Greece's actions and wait for rescue from other troops when the Greeks had evil intentions. However, the current situation forced Nuri Pasha to change their mission because the Ottoman army was simply not enough at present, so they were given priority to retreat when attacked by the Greek army. As for his officers and soldiers, who were mainly composed of local people, he couldn't care less about the possibility of major problems arising from the retreat point. Although the 2 countries have not sent troops yet, the situation is already very unfavorable to the Ottomans. The Balkan countries are adding Italy, making the Ottoman army simply not enough. Nuri Pasha is also aware of this, so he is asking the staff officers to work hard to formulate a new mobilization order. While the old marshal was busy issuing various orders, the adjutant hurried in. He came to the old marshal and whispered in his ear. After hearing what the adjutant said, Nuri Pasha opened his eyes and spoke. "Please come in quickly." He then continued to address others in the office. "You guys go out first." Faced with the words of the Minister of War, the others immediately left in a hurry. Although they wanted to know which big shot this was, no one dared to stay to find out. After the other people were cleared, the adjutant came in with a man wearing a hood and covering himself tightly. As soon as he saw the human form, Nuri Pasha was immediately happy. "Your Majesty Grand Vizier, what are you doing? Are you afraid that someone will know when we meet?" "Yes, the person coming is Camel Pasha." After he took off his hood, he saw the old marshal in front of him and said helplessly, "Marshal Nuri Pasha, I don't want to do this either, but sometimes I have to do this to avoid suspicion." Although Camel Pasha didn't say whom to avoid, the old marshal knew what he meant, and his face tightened. "If His Majesty asks, I will answer truthfully." Camel Pasha certainly knew the attitude of the old marshal in front of him, and he felt that the other party had misunderstood. Besides, the most trusted person by the Sultan, he would only talk nonsense to this person if he was crazy. "I don't intend to hide it. I just want to avoid the crazy talk below, Marshal." Nuri Pasha also believed Camel Pasha's explanation. After all, the other party knew that he was loyal to His Majesty the Sultan. "Then, Your Excellency, why are you looking for me this time?" Faced with the question from the Minister of War, Camel Pasha did not answer immediately, but asked a question. "I don't know, Marshal. Do you think our country still has a chance to win this war?" In the face of Camel Pasha's inquiry, Marshal Nuri Pasha remained silent. He was the one who understood the war situation through his mouth, and of course he was also the one who knew the facts best. When it comes to fighting Italy alone, he is 50% sure of maintaining a balance in the war. Although this may cause the Ottomans to lose the Mediterranean islands, at least the core European territory can be preserved. But with the addition of Bulgaria and Montenegro, he only has 3 levels of certainty: giving up part of his territory, holding key cities, and waiting for reinforcement from Asia. The main thing that made Marshal Nuri Pasha lose confidence was Bulgaria. The country's location divided the Ottoman territory in Europe, and the middle was connected by the coastal belt of Western Thrace. This is a taboo in the military, and cannot be changed. Unless he wants to provoke the 11th Russo-Turkish War, this result cannot be changed. Although the relationship between Bulgaria and Russia has been very bad recently, as long as the empire shows its intention to deal with Bulgaria, the 2 countries will quickly get closer. As for the current situation, even Marshal Nuri Pasha, a famous general, also knows that Osman is already in a losing situation in this war. And the only outcome is how much he loses. But even if that were the case, he wouldn't reveal his true identity. Although our situation is not good, the Imperial Army is not afraid. Although we are not confident of victory, they still need to pay a bloody price. Well, the old marshal pointed here and there and answered questions that he didn't understand, seeing that the person in front of him refused to tell the result. Camel Pasha certainly knew what the other person was taboo about. As the number one person in the military, if he says that he has no confidence, then the army will lose even more confidence and morale. Since the other party didn't want to say anything, Camel Pasha wouldn't embarrass him. I saw him speaking. If this war continues, the empire will suffer huge losses, and the conditions it will encounter will be even more harsh. You want to sue for peace? Faced with these words of Camel Pasha in front of him, Marshal Nuri Pasha stood up and slapped the table, angrily scolding him. What does this make the officers and soldiers fighting bloody battles at the front think? You have to know that this will cause a big mess. Are you colluding with the Italians? Facing the angry old marshal, Camel Pasha did not speak, but looked at him quietly with calmness in his eyes. Faced with the Grand Vizier's expression, Nuri Pasha gradually calmed down his anger. After this war, no matter whether I win or lose, I can't continue to sit in this position, so I have nothing to fear this time. Yes, the Italians contacted me and proposed their peace talks with Bulgaria. Conditions in Montenegro. Then Camel Pasha told the other parties conditions. After hearing the news that Italy needed Libya and Albania and then wanted to make Crete independent, Marshal Nuri Pasha blushed and waited. After hearing that Bulgaria wanted half of Macedonia, he couldn't sit still. They are delusional, and our Ottoman army will never agree to it. Marshal Nuri Pasha's stubborn performance gave Camel Pasha a headache. Why are you delaying at this time? Just when he was about to speak to persuade the other party, the door was suddenly opened, and the adjutant walked in with an anxious look on his face, holding a telegram. Marshal, Komodini has fallen. The enemy has captured the city. What? Marshal? Nuri Pasha and Camel Pasha at the scene exclaimed in unison. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230 Response. The news that Bulgaria had captured Komodini not only shocked the Ottomans, but also surprised Carlo's ally. You must know that it has only been 7 days, and it has only been 7 days, since Bulgaria declared war on the Ottomans. Regarding the Bulgarian super high combat effectiveness, a field military observation group commented on this. With good strength and super high morale, the Bulgarians deserved this victory. Of course, unlike what was published in newspapers, Carlo had a detailed combat experience in his hands, which was sent by the Italian military advisory group. Yes, Italy not only participated in the battle itself, but also sent military advisory groups to the Montenegrin and Bulgarian armies. In this report, the details of the battle between the Bulgarian army and the Ottoman army are told in detail. Only in this detailed battle report did Carlo learn the specific truth. From the very beginning, the 1st Bulgarian army followed Major General Gudshev's orders and launched a rapid and powerful offensive, breaking through 2 lines of defense of the Ottoman army one after another, and arrived at the city of Komodini within 3 days. In fact, the effect was very good. The Ottoman army, which originally planned to rely on the defense line to build more defensive offensives for Komodini, was caught off guard. The Bulgarian army that rushed to the city did not give the enemy time to replenish themselves and immediately threw themselves into the siege. After 4 days of hard fighting, they finally drove the Ottoman army out of the city. In this battle, the First Army suffered 5,470 killed, 11,467 injured, and 379 missing, with total casualties reaching more than 16,000. Of course, their results were also very good. The defending Ottoman army lost 7,891 people, captured and injured 14,915 people, lost 69 artillery pieces, and more than 10,000 guns. It can be said that more than half of the defenders suffered casualties, and the resistance was already very fierce. Major General Gudshev's First Army was the first to capture the target, and was also the main target in the first phase of the Bulgarian operation. A very interesting thing needs to be said here. Before the war started, the highest military rank in Bulgaria was colonel. Major General Guchev was urgently promoted 2 days before the war started, along with 3 others in fact. There are currently only 4 major generals in Bulgaria, namely Major General Guchev of the 1st Army, Major General Guchev of the 2nd Army, Major General Yuzunov of the 3rd Army, and the Army General Staff who commands the remaining domestic forces. Major General Nikolai. Don't be surprised by this. You must know that in the Serbian-Bulgarian War 5 years ago, the highest military rank in Bulgaria before the war started was captain. That war was also called the Captain's War. If you are interested, you can look up this war. It can be said that as long as Bulgaria makes one wrong move, everything will be lost. The timing, location, people, and luck are all overwhelming. The reason for this is that before this, the senior Bulgarian officers were Russian officers. From this, we can see how powerful Russia was in Bulgaria at that time point. Of course, after the 2 countries fell out, these Bulgarian captains fully assumed the military command of the war. And it performed very well, which made Serbia, which at that time, considered itself the #1 in combat effectiveness among the small Balkan countries, disgraced. Salvia had defeated 2 Ottoman army attacks during the Russo-Turkish War, and of course it was generally highly regarded. After reading the battle report on Bulgaria's victory over Komodini, Carlo raised his head and looked at the silent army minister General Saragat and asked, "Your Majesty General Saragat, Bulgaria has captured Komodini, why hasn't the army broken through the enemy's defense line yet?" There is a reason why Carlo asked this, because the Italian army has currently landed 160,000 people in Albania, and the number continues to increase. In order to transport these troops and the supplies they need, transportation troops and drafted ships are operating at full capacity. However, these troops, led by General Cadorna, Chief of General Staff, have been unable to break through the fortifications defended by the Ottoman Macedonian Second Army and break into the Macedonian region. Facing Carlo's question, Admiral Cadorna thought about it for a while before speaking. "Your Majesty, our situation is very different from that of the Bulgarians. They have a sudden battle, and we have always been the focus of the Ottoman army's surveillance. In addition, the fortifications built by the enemy, based on the terrain advantages of the Dinara Mountains, are very difficult to attack. Due to the roads and terrain, it is difficult for our army to send heavy artillery to places where support is needed, so more soldiers can only attack, which is not very efficient, and can easily cause huge casualties." Faced with the explanation given by Admiral Cadorna, Carlo did not agree. "I can believe the reason, Your Excellency," the Admiral has given, "but I just don't know how to tell it to the King's people. You must know that your weapons and equipment are much better than the other party, and such results cannot convince others at all." At the end of his speech, Carlo stretched out his hand and gestured. "I can accept the result that the army breaks through the enemy's interception and enters the Macedonian area within 5 days. If it cannot be done by that time, then the army's performance will not be worthy of this victory." Yes, Carlo gave the army a showdown at this time. Carlo couldn't stand it anymore after all the forbearance he had done before. In exchange for such a result. You must know that except for the performance of capturing Durrës and Tirana at the beginning, which was pretty good, the army's performance at other times was really not good. In battles with the Ottoman army, the army often played a 1-2-1 or 1-2-2 exchange ratio. Moreover, the efficiency of attacking breakthroughs is not high, and it is still blocked by the enemy in the mountainous area. Although the enemy has been held back, is it time to hold the enemy back? At this time, facing the enemies surrounded by Macedonia, how can we get the biggest piece of cake if we don't show enough combat effectiveness? You know, Albania is very important to Italy, and it must show enough strength to shut up others. Italy is not the only one who wants this land. Facing the 5-day deadline given by Carlo, Admiral Saragat did not dare to refute it at this time, because he knew that if he refused, the king would not be polite to him, and it would not be impossible to replace him. Ignoring the silent Minister of War, Carlo turned to the Minister of the Navy, who was watching the excitement, and spoke. "Admiral Garlock, are your ships ready? The Navy has been having a good time recently. The enemy has no strength to compete with itself. Although this has caused it to lose a lot of military exploits, it also reduces a lot of dangers. It only requires escorting and shelling. This kind of mission can be done by any qualified general. Admiral Gorek knew what Carlo meant and nodded quickly in reply. Your Majesty, the Navy is ready. Then, start hurricane planning immediately, as commanded. After talking to the military, Carlo turned to the Prime Minister and others. Things on the battlefield are left to the military, and other things require your efforts. Currently, there are 2 more countries than Serbia and Greece, so we need more diplomatic support. This time we need to increase support from various countries. After all, we are in liberating the oppressed Christians. Faced with the task given by Carlo, Bacona, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, stepped forward. Your Majesty, please rest assured that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has made every effort to win the support of other countries, at least in terms of public opinion, to win the support of the people of all countries. Facing the words of the Foreign Secretary, Carlo shook his head and said, thinking of Britain and Russia behind the 2 countries, and France hiding behind the Ottomans. This is not enough. You need to work harder. Our enemies are not just the Ottoman in front of us. Chapter 231. The army was whipped. With Carlo's strict orders, various urging orders issued from Rome forced all parties in the kingdom to speed up progress, the most eye-catching of which was the Italian army in Albania. The headquarters is located in the Balkan Army headquarters in Tirana. General Cardona, the Chief of General Staff and Commander of the Army, has just dropped a telegram. This was sent by General Saragut, Minister of War. The content was mainly about King Carlo's requirements, and asked him what else he needed. Facing this obviously urging telegram from the Secretary of War, General Cardona couldn't help but rub his somewhat swollen temples, and smiled bitterly. I originally thought that this location was a good job, but after arriving in Tirana, I realized that it was a hard job. As the Minister of War said, the Ottoman defenders relied on the dangerous terrain of the Dinara Mountains to defend tenaciously. Due to the limitations of the mountains, the heavy firepower of the Italian army could not enter the mountains at all, and could only attack it with light artillery. However, although Italy's light artillery has an advantage in quantity, the limitations of mountain combat cannot suppress the opponent's artillery like plain terrain. Therefore, in the absence of artillery suppression effect, the Italian officers and soldiers had a particularly difficult time fighting. Basically, it was a battle with the Ottoman defenders on the top of the mountains. Just climbing the mountains took a lot of energy. And when they finally captured the hilltop and drove the enemy away, they found that there were still more positions and fortifications to fight for behind. This sight made many officers and soldiers feel really discouraged. Moreover, the Ottoman defenders were not stupid. They used night attacks and cold-blooded attacks on Italian officers and soldiers from time to time, which made everyone even more nervous. Therefore, the attack speed cannot be increased at all. We can only advance steadily and gradually at a speed of 1 or 2 kilometers per day. However, this time the urging telegram sent from Rome put Admiral Cardona under great pressure. He felt that he could not continue fighting like this at this time. The previous suggestions of Lieutenant General Simeon, commander of the Third Army, immediately came to his mind. Cardona is also a decisive person and immediately picked up the phone. Immediately sent someone to find Lieutenant General Simeon and tell him that I have something important to ask him. Fortunately, the Third Army had just retreated in the past 2 days, which allowed him to quickly find Simeon. About an hour later, Lieutenant General Simeon hurried to the headquarters. After a briefing, he finally came to General Cardona. But the Admiral has a lot on his plate, and someone is still reporting on it. Sitting on the bench outside the office, Simone faintly heard the sound coming from the door. Your progress is too slow. The heavy artillery must be transported to Ermenity as soon as possible. I don't want to hear your explanation or your reasons. You only have 2 days. If you can't get it, I will personally send you to a military court, General. Simeon was extremely surprised when he heard General Cardona's energetic voice penetrate the door. The Chief of General Staff rarely got angry, let alone such a big one. But despite hearing these angry voices, Simeon was not worried about himself at all. You must know that his Third Army is the group with the best performance on the entire front. Even if it is to fight, it will not be his turn. After a while, a general with the rank of Major General walked out of the office with a frustrated expression. Simone knew him. This was Major General Gardner, the commander of the 2nd Heavy Artillery Brigade. Although this man was only in charge of dozens of artillery pieces, the minimum calibers were all above 150mm. However, due to the restrictions on heavy artillery in the mountains, he was not allowed to use them in the field. Nothing stands a chance in this war, of course. Based on the news he just heard, it seemed that Admiral Cadorna was going to forcibly drag the heavy artillery into the mountain point. After greeting the nodding figure, Simeon was invited into the office. "Simone, you're here." Admiral Cadorna, who served as the commander, smiled when he saw Simeon coming in, and it was completely impossible to tell that he was so angry just now. "Your Excellency, Chief of General Staff, here I come." Faced with the friendly greetings from the Chief of General Staff, what else could Simeon do? Naturally, he had the same friendly attitude. After both of them sat down, Admiral Cadorna continued. "Simone, after some consideration, I think the plan you proposed last time is feasible." After hearing that, the Chief of General Staff said that he wanted to consider his plan. Although Simeon did not say it on the surface, he felt excited in his heart. In fact, it has been almost a week since he made the suggestion. "So, when does the program start?" Simone's inquiry was not a problem for Admiral Cadorna, who took out a plan and said, "Let's start tomorrow. This is my slightly modified plan, based on your plan. You can take a look first." Simone took the plan and read it carefully without saying a word. Facing serious Simone, Admiral Cadorna did not disturb him. For a while, the only sounds in the office were the sound of the pendulum and the turning of books. This plan is really based on Simeon's previous proposal. It concentrates Italy's 4 mountain brigades in Albania and his 3rd Army to form a powerful offensive force. Then the independent 2nd Heavy Artillery Brigade will also attack in 2 days. Joined together, superior troops, and supplemented by powerful artillery, forcibly broke through the enemy's heavy troops deployed at Kosovo Pass and invaded the Macedonian area. The Kosovo Pass is the closest pass from Tirana to the Macedonian town of Prilep. There are currently 5 such passes from Albania to Macedonia, but the most important 3 are the ones leading to Prishti, the future region of Kosovo, Kukes Pass and Gostova Pass leading to the core Macedonian city of Skopje, and Kosovo Pass leading to Prilep. The reason why Admiral Cadorna chose the Kosovo Pass is that Prilep is in an important position. It can not only threaten Skopje on the flanks through here, but also continue to threaten Macedonia's largest port Salonika to the west, with its allies. Bulgarian troops converge. Of course, this is just the general outline of the plan. In addition, it also covers various aspects such as troop assembly, attack direction breakdown, artillery configuration, etc. This content has 20 or 30 pages and requires at least an hour to read, and Simeon is enough. I watched it for an hour and a half. During this period, Admiral Cadorna was sitting in his office, waiting for him to read the plan. Admiral Cadorna asked, after he put down the plan, "How about it?" "It's much more complete than I thought before. I feel that according to the plan, we will definitely be able to break through the enemy's interception within 5 days." After hearing Simone's words, Admiral Cadorna stretched out 3 fingers. "Only 3 days?" Simone was stunned by these words. Time must be too tight. Seeing Simone's expression, Admiral Cadorna still didn't understand, so he directly told Carlo about giving him 5 days. Since this is a forced order from the king, it seems that there is no room for negotiation in terms of time, and Simeon said simply, "That's okay, but I still need some supplies and equipment." After hearing Simeon's words, Cadorna smiled. "Whatever you want, as long as it's available in Albania, I'll find it for you." While the two of them were discussing the next battle plan, a large fleet was sailing towards Salonika in the warm Aegean Sea. Chapter 232 Hurricane Plan. The warm Aegean Sea has always had traces of human activities since ancient times. From the early Phoenicians to the ancient Greeks, and then the Romans, people of all ages appeared in the Aegean Sea. Today, a huge fleet passed through the Aegean Islands and sailed towards the north. The scale of this fleet was so large that many passing merchant ships quickly avoided it. because there are a large number of warships in this fleet. The flag above shows its identity. Italy. Vice Admiral Yagia was on his flagship Turin, looking at the mighty fleet under his command with complacency. The fleet has assembled the most elite battleships in the navy. 5 Dario and its improved class battleships, 3 Turin class, 2 Venetian improved class battleships, plus a dozen other battleships. This fleet is in this fleet. The sea is the absolute overlord. Being able to stand out from other competitors. How could he not let Lieutenant General Yagi vent his inner joy? On one side of the mighty warship, dozens of conscripted merchant ships sailed hard under the protection of the warship. They were fully loaded with various supplies and officers and soldiers for landing operations. Yes, the Hurricane plan is landing war, but this time it is no longer a landing on an island, but also in conjunction with ally Bulgaria's attack on Salonika Point. Although the Bulgarian First Army captured the key city of Komodini in western Thrace, this did not liberate Bulgarian forces. However, the Second Bulgarian Army, which attacked Adrianople and was responsible for containing the enemies in the direction of Istanbul, had sent several emergency telegrams one after another. More and more enemies came across the sea from Istanbul, and they were almost overwhelmed. Therefore, the First Army, after capturing Komodini, could only go to reinforce the Second Army. As for the Third Army, which had just captured Kilkis, it also did not have enough strength. On the one hand, they needed to withstand the counterattack of the Ottoman army in Macedonia, and on the other hand, they wanted to balance the somewhat inadequate power of the Salonika offensive. So Bulgaria turned to Italy. The Italian navy originally had a plan to land in the Balkans, but it was not far ahead. According to the plan formulated by the Italian navy, after seizing the island of Crete, they prepared to compete for many Ottoman islands in the Aegean Sea, and then landed on the Balkan Peninsula at the right time, to cooperate with the frontal army forces. Judging from the navy's arrangements, landing on the Balkan Peninsula comes after the islands. In addition, the Ottoman territories in North Africa have never been included in the scope of landing operations by the navy. Because the area was not strategically located, it was of little use in defeating the Ottomans. In addition, the current domestic perception of the region is that it is a desert wasteland. Except for a few nomadic tribes, it cannot benefit Italy at all. It is more of an addition to the Albanian region. Didn't you see that the Ottomans only deployed less than 5,000 troops in the area? The local population of more than 300,000 could only support so many troops. But as the saying goes, plans cannot keep up with changes. Who would have thought that the Bulgarians were so fierce that they completed blocking the land connection between the Ottoman mainland and Macedonia in just 1 week? Coupled with Bulgaria's request for help, the navy had to advance its plan to land on the Balkan Peninsula. Fortunately, before that, the navy had basically completed the preparations for seizing the Aegean Islands. It only needed to change the target to Salonika. Therefore, this operation allowed the navy to play a leading role, and Lieutenant General Yagi was certainly very happy about this. Finally getting rid of unknown small tasks such as bombarding Ottoman ports and escorting, he could lead the navy to show its capabilities. Just as Lieutenant General Yagi was secretly happy, a staff officer ran over. Reporting to Your Excellency, Commander, our fleet is currently approaching Scarce Island. As a senior Navy officer, Lieutenant General Yagia certainly knew the location of Scarce Island. This island was about 240 nautical miles away from the Salonika Peninsula where they needed to reach. That's all in a day's work. Order the fleet to continue to maintain a speed of 10 knots, and also have the first cruiser fleet speed up, so that they can arrive in advance to lay a good front position for us. As you command, Your Majesty. Commander. Following Lieutenant General Yagia's order, the first cruiser formation, which was upgraded from 2 Venices as a core, immediately increased its speed, and they gradually distanced themselves from the large formation. Although the 2 Venice upgrades did not reach the maximum speed, in order to allow other cruisers to keep up, the speed of 16 knots was still much faster than the slow-moving fleet of 10 knots. After 2 or 3 hours, the people in the Grand Fleet could no longer see his figure point at this time. I'm afraid that Major General Levy, who is in charge of leading the cruiser formation, is probably still thinking about trying to encounter the aging Ottoman Navy. Vice Admiral Yagi looked at the slow fleet he commanded, feeling a little uncomfortable in his heart. But who needs to take care of the transport ships in the formation? These guys are considered high speed. If they can run 10 knots, these transport ships carry nearly 40,000 officers and soldiers and their equipment. They are the entire 1st Marine Division, the 1st Brigade of the 2nd Marine Division, and most of the guards, which are affiliated to the Navy. We will not go into detail about the 1st Marine Division and the guards. We can also talk about the 2nd Division point at present. The 2nd Marine Division is not full. Although it has the name of the 2nd Division, only one brigade of the 2nd Division currently has combat effectiveness. As for the 2nd Brigade, although it is fully staffed, its training has not been completed. Currently being left on the island of Crete by the Navy, it is still capable of quelling the defeated Ottoman troops huddled in the mountains in the center of the island point on one of the transport ships. Major Haldane Cossens, the commander of the 1st Battalion of the 1st Marine Division, 1st Brigade, 2nd Regiment, was writing and drawing in his room. He was summarizing the previous battle in Crete Point. Because his battalion landed late, it suffered little loss in the brutal street fighting. Therefore, without any rest time, it was sent together with other follow-up troops to chase down the defeated Ottoman troops. Only 2 days ago, they received orders to come out of the mountains and then boarded the transport ship to prepare for the next war. Taking advantage of this free time, Cossens certainly needed to summarize the previous battles, which he had been strongly requested to do when he was in the guards. During street fighting, the morale of the Ottoman officers and soldiers was obviously lower than that of the officers. Of course, this may be because the officers were trying to protect their rich property. However, the combat skills of the Ottoman soldiers were obviously much worse than ours. It even happened once in our battalion. During the offensive battle, an Ottoman soldier fired at our soldiers 10 meters away and missed. This is really an imaginable point. In addition, their soldiers also have poor maintenance of their guns. This can be seen from the enemy's guns that we captured. The bolts are almost stuck. While Cossens was engrossed in writing, there was a knock on the door. Cossens' thoughts were interrupted, and he had to get up to open the door. "Hello, Major Cossens. Do you have time to have a drink with me?" Cossens recognized the person. He was another major on the same transport ship as him, Major Bandy Ivine. He was a battalion commander of the 2nd Marine Division. He had already invited him for drinks twice, just because he wanted to gain battlefield command experience from him. Cossens, who originally wanted to refuse, after seeing the wine in the other person's hand, he swallowed and let the other person in. "Please, take a seat, Major Irwin. It has been a long time since he saw the Gulf wine from his hometown. When he saw this wine, he thought of the beautiful and charming daughter of the winery owner. Maybe you can ask someone to find out if Miss Courtney is married." Although Cossens was thinking far ahead, he still drank happily with Major Irwin. After finally sending Major Irwin away feeling dizzy, he glanced at the note he had put away on the table and made some calculations. "Let's write again. Mantow knows that updates have been slow these days. Please rest assured that the normal 2 chapters will be restored tomorrow." Chapter 233 Battle of Salonika, Part 1. The Salonika Peninsula is a 3-fingered claw extending from the Macedonian region to the Aegean Sea. It protects Thessaloniki, the largest port in Macedonia, in the depths of the Thermaic Gulf Point. Although Thessaloniki is the largest port in the region, there are still some small ports that serve as fishing ports on the Thessaloniki Peninsula. Among them are 28 kilometers southeast of Thessaloniki and the Caracas, also in the Thermaic Gulf. Likriti is one of the 2 major fishing ports in the area. The other fishing port is in Musania, which is 20 kilometers away and is further away from Salonika Point. But today, local fishermen and residents watched with surprise as a large number of ships appeared on the sea. Anyone who is not blind can see that many of them are warships with the towering Italian naval flag. Who can not know what they are? Many of these small warships were patrolling the seashore less than 2 or 3 kilometers away, with their dark muzzles pointed at the land, ready to fire at any enemy that might appear. In fact, they were overthinking it. After seeing so many warships and transport ships, a company garrison stationed in the town had already left in a hurry under the leadership of its commander. Also leaving with them were the Ottoman missionaries in the town, local officials under the cover of the navy ships. The Marine Corps officers and soldiers used small boats to row desperately to the beach next to the town point after the boat docked. Battalion Commander Cosenz, who was the commander of the first landing force, immediately ordered his men, "Quick, everyone spread out and be alert." This was Cosenz's experience gained from other officers in previous landing battles. The first task is to spread the alert, and be alert to possible attacks by the defenders. The officers and soldiers of the 1st Battalion followed his orders very well and immediately dispersed in twos and threes, looking around with vigilant eyes. However, there was no enemy movement around at all. Apart from them, everything was so quiet and peaceful, which made Cosenz feel a little embarrassed. But no matter how embarrassing it is better than being attacked by the enemy during the landing point. After waiting for all the officers and soldiers of his battalion to come ashore, Cosenz continued to give orders. The 2nd company went out to explore the surrounding areas. The 1st company stayed at the landing site, and the 3rd and 4th companies followed me to the town to have a look. Following Cosenz's orders, each company that received the mission acted in accordance with his orders. The entrenched company began to occupy the commanding heights around the beach, preparing to protect the landing site. The 2nd company took the squad as a unit and moved forward in a searching posture. As for the 3rd and 4th companies, they formed a battle formation and moved towards the town. Cosenz followed them and explored the town. The town is a little strange. There is no sound. They were about 500 meters closer to the town, and there was no gunfire. 300 meters, still no gunfire. Whether or not to go in has become Cosenz's top priority. Cosenz, who was hiding behind a field bank, immediately ordered after thinking about it, "Send a squad to search the town." Following his order, a squad of soldiers immediately touched it. Cosenz and other officers and soldiers all followed every move in this small town. 10 minutes later, a soldier was seen walking out of the town and gave them a safety gesture. How is this going? With this mood, Cosenz and other officers and soldiers rushed over immediately. It wasn't until Cosenz chatted with the soldier that he realized why the town was so unnaturally quiet. "You said the Ottoman army imprisoned the locals in the monastery before leaving." "Yes, Battalion Commander. We couldn't believe it before, but we did find those people in the monastery. They said that, after seeing our fleet early this morning, the local Ottoman army drove them all to the monastery from house to house. They were so frightened that they thought they were going to be killed. In addition, we searched the houses in the town, but there were no Ottoman officers and soldiers inside." After listening to the soldier's words, Cosenz didn't know why the other party did this, but since the enemy was gone, it was a good thing for him and the 1st Battalion. After hearing the soldiers' answers, Cosenz took 2 companies and occupied the town. Among them, the local residents who were released after being inspected kept thanking them. As for Cosenz, he stood by the simple fishing port made of stone and wood and spoke to the messenger beside him. "Immediately send people to occupy the commanding heights and signal to the fleet. The enemy has escaped, and you can land at the fishing port. Although the fishing port is simple, it is better than the beach." He took a look and saw that the wooden plank road here could transport some small artillery ashore. As the Calicrity defenders fled without a fight, a large number of small wooden boats were transported back and forth between the fishing port and the transport ship. They transported a large number of officers, soldiers, and weapons ashore. Unlike Cosenz's luck, in Musania, a local battalion of defenders did not retreat. Instead, they relied on the town's buildings to defend tenaciously. A regiment has landed and is besieging it. Boom, boom, boom. The shelling from warships at sea forced the local defenders to huddle in the town, and the screams from time to time caused military morale to turmoil. The firepower of warships was completely equivalent to that of heavy artillery, so that no building in the town could withstand the firepower after the warship bombardment. The reluctant garrison commander saw that more than half of his troops had been killed and wounded. So he had no choice but to give the order to retreat. Of course, they were still good, blocking the landing Italian officers and soldiers for half a day. Although this did not affect the landing of the Italian army, in the absence of coastal defense batteries, they still dared to defend the town with naval guns. It cannot but be said that this commander was very stubborn. Of course, the news that Italy had landed on the Salonika Peninsula could not be hidden from anyone at all. At noon, the defenders of Salonika knew the news located in the garrison headquarters in the city. Lieutenant General Aus, the commander of the Ottoman Ninth Army and the commander of the city's defenses, looked at the garrison commander who ran back from Calicrity with an angry look. Captain Attacchi, you said that the Italians landed a regiment of troops at one time, so you retreated with your men. In front of Lieutenant General Aouzi, Captain Attacchi, who had turned like the wind, answered uneasily. Yes, General. The enemy came to the outer sea with many warships. Those warships protected a large number of transport ships. They were like locusts, operating various ships to land ashore. The soldiers and I saw that the situation was not good and could only pull back first. Okay, you have nothing to do here. After hearing this answer, Lieutenant General Aouzi sent him away with a look of disgust. Although this person is a bit timid and afraid of getting into trouble, it is not convenient to punish him during the current employment situation. Besides, the news of the Italian landing was too important to him. Somebody come. Following Lieutenant General Aouzi's shout, a young officer immediately opened the door and walked in. What orders does the general have? Order the 14th Division to send a brigade to reinforce Calameria. Also order the troops in Firafia to gradually withdraw. In addition, send a telegram to General Yilmaz that we still need reinforcement, and tell him that the Italians have landed on the peninsula. These orders from Lieutenant General Aouzi are all related to the situation in Salonika. Reinforce Calameria, because there are coastal defense forts there. Unlike those in Durrës, Salonika's coastal defense forts are very advanced and equipped with Krupp heavy coastal defense guns. As long as the fort is not lost, those Italian naval warships will not dare to come in. In addition, there are not many troops in Salonika. Currently, he only has one 14th Division in hand, and the other troops are in Firafia, resisting the attack of the Bulgarian Third Army that captured Kilkis. Now with the Italians landing, he can only withdraw his troops first, which is why he needs to send a brigade to station in Calameria first. Of course, one brigade is not enough. After the other troops withdraw, he will send all 14 divisions there. In addition, I would like to add that the Calameria coastal defense fort protrudes from the promontory less than 4 kilometers south of the city, while Firafia is 16 kilometers north of the city. It can be said that Italy and Bulgaria are one to the south and one to the north, forming a strong opposition to Thessaloniki threatened. Chapter 234 Battle of Salonika, Part 2. As the defenders made adjustments under the orders of their commander, Lieutenant General Aus, the landing Italian army and the Bulgarian Third Army finally met under the city point. Although the two sides were separated by Salonika, communication was still possible, and a battle plan for the city was also proposed. In Semia, 7 kilometers away from Calameria, the headquarters of Lieutenant General Grove, who commanded the landing force, was established here. Inside the headquarters, Lieutenant General Grover was holding a pre-war meeting with others in the conference room. After discussing with the Bulgarians, our current task is to capture Calameria. This area is currently defended by the enemy's 14th Division of the Ottoman Army. We need to penetrate their defense lines and seize the coastal forts so that the fleet can prepare for the next. Provide fire support in the battle to seize the city. After explaining the purpose of this operation, Lieutenant General Grove immediately assigned tasks. Major General Banks, your 1st Marine Division flanks us and is responsible for blocking enemy reinforcement. I have already discussed with Major General Yuzunov, commander of the Bulgarian Third Army, before we launch an attack on Calameria. At that time, the Bulgarians will also launch an attack on Salonika to contain the enemy. Facing Lieutenant General Grove's words, the tall Major General Banks immediately answered, "As you command, General." Major General Banks's obedience to orders also involves his background. He was originally from the Guards. When faced with the orders of Lieutenant General Grove of the Guards, he naturally had no choice but to obey. In fact, it wasn't just him. Major General Roy of the 2nd Marine Division, who was still on the mission to wipe out the defeated army in Crete, was also from the Guards officially. Therefore, only Lieutenant General Grove is the most suitable candidate to serve as the commander of the landing force. As for the army generals, they are not suitable for this position at all. After Major General Banks answered, Lieutenant General Grove continued to issue the mission Colonel Laws, your brigade will launch a diversionary attack against the defenders from the northeast. The main offensive task will be completed by the guards. The attack launch time is scheduled for May 7th, 2 days later. Everyone, go and prepare. With these words of Lieutenant General Grove, the meeting was declared over. Several division and brigade commanders also stood up immediately, preparing to go back and arrange their own combat missions. As for Lieutenant General Grove, he is also very busy. In addition to paying attention to the overall combat plan, he also needs to pay attention to the affairs of the guards. Although his deputy, Major General Pilev, was watching, he still needed some attention. After all, this was the guards. As the time for the battle approaches, all troops have stepped up preparations, collecting guns, ammunition, artillery and other materials. At present, the only temporary port that the army has converted from those 2 fishing ports has been urged by them to operate 24 hours a day. It was very exhausting, and a group of logistics soldiers were paralyzed. Point of course, their exhaustion also allowed the landing force to obtain the last supplies before the war. More than 1,000 rifles, 800,000 rounds of ammunition, 11 artillery pieces, including a heavy artillery piece, more than 3,000 rounds of artillery shells, 310,000 grenades and other supplies become the results they deliver to the frontline troops. Are you wondering why there are so many grenades? This is all experience accumulated from previous battles. When they landed on Crete, the Marines and guards discovered that grenades were very useful in street fighting, far exceeding the effectiveness of guns. So this time all ministries strongly requested to add more grenades. In fact, they are not the only ones. The army on the other side of the Balkan Peninsula also praises grenades. Therefore, Italy's domestic arsenals are currently working overtime to produce grenades to meet the needs of frontline soldiers. As for the Bulgarian Third Army on the other side of Salonika, they are also making various preparations, replenishing ammunition, reorganizing damaged troops, etc. were equally busy. Point as the defenders of Salonika, the Ottoman army was certainly no exception. The enemies outside the city were making unscrupulous preparations. They were not blind, so they were equally busy building fortifications, barricades, and vitality points. After 2 busy days like this, a new day arrived, and the war was about to break out. Point the Italian artillery deployed outside the city of Calameria took the lead in firing the first shot in the offensive and defensive battle of Salonika. Fire, following the commander's order on the artillery position, the cannon, the king of war, immediately burst out with sufficient power. Hundreds of artillery pieces were placed in 12 positions, firing artillery shells at the city of Calameria. These artillerymen fired artillery shells at the fastest speed, basically reaching a rate of fire of 3 to 4 rounds per minute. The highest artillery group reached a rate of fire of 4.8 rounds. These shells lived up to their expectations and fell one after another on the buildings in the city and on the defenders' positions. The violent and continuous explosions covered many places in the city with smoke and dust, which could not dissipate for a long time. Point of course, when faced with enemy artillery fire, the defenders would not be polite, and counterattack artillery fire soon came. Although the defenders did not have as many artillery pieces as the attacking Italian army, they did have a powerful weapon. The 254mm coastal defense heavy artillery, with its ultra-long range and huge power, became the core of the defenders' artillery counterattack. Boom! A deafening explosion sounded next to an artillery position, and the officers and soldiers on the position were shaken by the loud explosion. Even the horses tied aside for transportation became restless, and these animals accustomed to artillery fire were also alarmed. Point the experienced commander immediately changed his color. It's heavy artillery. Quick, move the position quickly. Following his order, the officers and soldiers who were suppressed by the heavy artillery immediately hurriedly brought their horses over, mounted the artillery and fled quickly. No one wanted to stay and test the power of the heavy artillery. Point in the well-hidden headquarters on the side, Lieutenant General Grove couldn't help but shook his head when he saw such a scene. It was not that he had any objection to the transfer of artillery, but he did not expect that the enemy's artillery fire would be so accurate, so it seemed that this battle would be difficult to fight. Boom! Suddenly, a violent explosion sounded from a mountain kernel. Lieutenant General Grove glanced at it. He knew clearly that this was originally an artillery position, but now it seemed to be in danger. After ordering the artillery to fire at most a base number of ammunition at each position, it must be moved immediately. Although this will greatly reduce the sustainability of the artillery, it is important to preserve the artillery, so this is the only way. Moreover, small and medium-sized artillery with a diameter of less than 100 mm is currently being used. Medium and large caliber artillery cannot participate in this artillery battle due to insufficient mobility. In order to avoid unnecessary losses after a whole morning of intermittent bombardment, Lieutenant General Grove felt that he was almost done. On the one hand, the shelling effect was not good, and on the other hand, he did not have enough shells. So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he picked up the phone. "Now I order all ministries to start attacking in accordance with their previous combat missions." Following his order, the officers and soldiers of the guards and the 1st Marine Brigade immediately jumped out of the trenches and attacked the city of Calameria Point. The brutal siege now begins. Chapter 235 Battle of Salonika, Part 2. The fierce offensive and defensive battle in Calameria has entered its third day point. In the first 2 days, the guards and the 1st Brigade of the 2nd Marine Division suffered a lot of casualties. Of course, as a price, the enemy Ottoman 14th Division also suffered a lot of losses. However, even if everyone suffered a lot of losses, as long as dawn comes, then the battle continues. The armies of the two sides are still fighting together again. It depends on who can bear it first. Point. The sound of artillery, gunshots, roars, and screams intertwined together, playing a song of death on the battlefield. Point. Petty was calm and composed, trying hard to eliminate these sounds. He carefully hid behind a pile of rocks and set the sight through the cracks in the rocks to see the figure of a defender on the position. This soldier was very good at marksmanship. Petty's several comrades were shot by him. He aimed closely at him and then pulled the trigger with a pop sound. A bloody hole appeared on the head of the Ottoman soldier who was good at shooting, and then he fell in the trench without saying a word. Point. After killing the defender, Petty took a deep breath and hid behind the pile of rocks motionless. After waiting for a while, he stretched out his head to observe the battle situation. Point. This time, he spotted the target at a glance. This was the commander of the garrison. The Ottoman officer wearing an officer's hat was constantly directing the battle. However, it is somewhat difficult to kill the opponent because his good military quality means that he does not keep his head exposed like other soldiers, and his walking back and forth and conscious dodging movements make Petty the hunter, who was praised by everyone in his hometown, felt a little troubled. Point. Hold your breath. Calculate the rules, and wait until the next time this officer shows up again. It will fall into his crotches. Pa. Another bullet hit the head of the low-ranking officer in the position, and a stream of red and white liquid surged out. Point. I have to admit that the new rifle I have is really good. At a distance of about 300 meters, the accuracy is still so good. Point. However, Petty had no time to observe the specific situation at this time, because the movement was too big this time, which exposed his position. Point. Petty hurriedly hid behind the pile of rocks, and the sound of bullets sizzling through the air above his head told him that if he had been there for 2 or 3 seconds at night, these bullets would not just pierce the air. Petty, who had escaped life and death, naturally did not dare to stay here, but it was not easy to leave. According to his estimation, there were at least 3 or 4 guns aimed at his direction. Point. Yes, Petty was a precision marksman. There was no such thing as a sniper at this time, but the military naturally had different uses for marksmen like him. They do not need to attack enemy positions like other infantry, but on the battlefield, they provide strong support to their comrades with their excellent marksmanship. Point. Therefore, the team members naturally hope to have a sharpshooter among their teammates to help them reduce pressure. Of course, help is mutual, and sometimes sharpshooters also need their help. For example, Petty needs their help very much now. Quick, cover me. Petty, who was unable to lift his head under the pressure of the opponent's fire, shouted for help. Point. Faced with Petty's cry for help, his comrades were naturally concerned about his predicament. They immediately fired their rifles to the fastest rate of fire, trying to take advantage of the firepower to suppress the enemy. Point. The M88 Carcano rifles in their hands have also fully demonstrated their trustworthiness. At least they are much better than the weapons in the hands of the Ottoman army. The opponent's sudden increase in firepower indeed suppressed the defenders' firepower. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Petty quickly ran out of Chile and jumped down a slope point. After doing all this, Petty felt frightened. He had almost been handed over to the stone trap before point, but at this time, they suddenly heard a burst of cheers. "What's going on here?" someone asked curiously. Suddenly their company commander, Captain Barron, ran over and informed them of the details. The 3 regiments next door have broken through the enemy's defense lines and have entered Calameria. This sentence immediately caused cheers on the battlefield and also greatly improved their morale. If others can do it, then they can do it too. In the following battle, it is obvious that the morale of both sides is different from before. And this news is not only a huge improvement for the officers and soldiers, it is also excellent news for Lieutenant General Grove, who is commanding the overall situation on the battlefield. You must know that in these 2 days of fighting, the landing force has lost nearly 3,000 people and more than 30 artillery pieces. This number is not small at all for the landing force with a total strength of less than 40,000. If he continues to be unable to penetrate, then he will consider asking the Navy for help and asking them to use warships to attract the attention of the enemy's coastal defense batteries. Fortunately, he hasn't sent this request for help yet, so the 3rd Regiment has indeed given him a face this time. Major General Pilev, the boys of the 3rd Regiment played well. I will take credit for them. Regarding Lieutenant General Grove's words, Major General Pilev, who had previously served as the commander of the regiment, naturally felt happy. The 3rd group did very well this time, and they are indeed worthy of the award. Faced with the words of his deputy Pilev, Grove continued to ask, have the reinforcement gone up? He is more concerned about the development of the war situation than praising the meritorious troops. Since there has been such a breakthrough, expansion is also on the mind of every commander. It has already gone up. Currently, we have transferred 1 battalion each from the 1st Regiment, 2nd Regiment, and a regiment left behind by the 1st Marine Division, to form a reinforced regiment. They have already connected with the 3rd Regiment. Very good. Facing the number of reinforcement listed in detail by Pilev, Grove was very satisfied, and a bold idea emerged in his mind. Tell me, what do you think if we let the 3rd Regiment, regardless of anything else, rush all the way to the coastal defense fort? Lieutenant General Grove's words shocked Pilev. This idea was simply audacious. From a military point of view, it is very easy for a lone army to go deep and be eliminated by the enemy. No one with basic military knowledge would do this, but since it can be brought up, it certainly makes sense, because the coastal defense fort of Calameria is on a hill called Kilk on the coast. These 4 coastal defense heavy guns were built on this hill point. As long as the 3rd Regiment can attack here, even if it cannot occupy the coastal defenses, it can still cut the small city of Calameria into 2 parts. This has a huge advantage for the next battle. At the same time, the difficulty will be reduced a lot. After all, no one wants to fight a protracted street battle with the defenders, of course. This has other benefits. That is, the defenders must strengthen the strength of the coastal defense forts, which also reduces the enemy's resistance in the city. Another advantage is that, as a coastal defense heavy artillery, it is not easy to shoot at close targets. This is also one of the shortcomings of the current coastal defense heavy artillery. However, I heard that new forts have appeared and this shortcoming has been eliminated. But according to the efficiency of the Ottoman Empire, you don't need to think about it. How could this new type of coastal defense fort appear here? Therefore, Grover thinks this risk is worth taking. Facing the words of his chief officer, Lieutenant General Grove, Pilev spoke after thinking about it for a while. Since you think it's worth it, let the 3rd Regiment attack. Both of them had made up their minds, so it would be easy. Subsequently, other offensive forces intensified their offensive in unison. They did not want the defenders to withdraw easily. As for the 3rd Guards Regiment, which had just been entrusted with the important task, after receiving the order, under the leadership of the regiment leader, Lieutenant Colonel Andres, they all attacked the city. They didn't care about their backs and flanks at all. They only focused on attacking the coastal defense forts. The enemy's crazy performance shocked the garrison commander Major General Akil, commander of the 14th Ottoman Division, and immediately took out his only reserve battalion to try to block the 3rd Regiment's offensive. This is the only battalion in his hands. The other troops are entangled in their positions and cannot retreat. A forced retreat will only lead to a rout point. However, by the time the battalion arrived, the 3rd Regiment had already reached the foot of the coastal defense fort point. There were not many coastal defense forts left here. Even with a battalion of reinforcement, they were still no match for the 3rd Regiment. After an afternoon of fierce fighting, the fort announced that it had changed hands in the evening. Faced with the loss of the fort, Major General Akile knew that the situation was lost and immediately ordered all ministries to break out on their own. And he himself felt ashamed of his expectations for Lieutenant General Aouzi and committed suicide by shooting himself at the headquarters at 19 o'clock in the evening. Although Major General Akile announced that he would break out of the encirclement on his own, it was not easy to break out from the encirclement. Under this order, many defenders were defeated and captured by the Italian army. And the gunfire continued until dawn that night. In the end, less than 4,000 officers and soldiers were able to break out of the city, and less than 3,000 were able to retreat to Salonika. As for the missing, nearly 1,000 people naturally ran away or went into hiding with Calameria captured by the Italian army. The current situation is extremely unfavorable for the defenders of Salonika, because without the protection of coastal defense forts, the powerful Italian navy will be able to directly threaten its safety with naval guns. It's time to make a choice. Chapter 236 Battle of Salonika, End. Lieutenant General Aouzi knew about the fall of Calameria last night. Regarding Major General Akile, who committed suicide out of fear of crime, no matter how angry he was in his heart, he would not vent it on a dead person. However, the problem left by Major General Akile was difficult for him to solve. The news of the loss of the coastal defense fort could not be concealed from the officers and soldiers below. Moreover, without the coastal defense fort, enemy warships could directly bombard the city of Salonika. In this way, the battle that was still possible will become more difficult. Moreover, as a senior Ottoman officer, he was not ignorant of the strength of the enemy warships, but at present, he had no weapons that could deal with them, so he could only be beaten in vain. Faced with this situation, Lieutenant General Aouzi didn't know what to do. Although he didn't know what to do, the Italian army would not give him time to think about it. Early the next morning, the Italian fleet appeared in front of the Salonika defenders. Although the defeated soldiers escaped last night and brought news of the fall of Calameria, ordinary soldiers don't have that much knowledge. But they will soon see it. Why Calameria is so important to Thessaloniki. Immediately, order each ship to bombard Salonika in turn. On the flagship Turin, Lieutenant General Yeagia, the fleet commander, immediately issued the order to open fire. Following his order, heavy artillery fire from Italian warships allowed the Ottomans to see the power of the navy. Bounce. The 7 battleships in the fleet used their main guns in order to open the eyes of the Ottoman bumpkins. Boom. A shell landed on a house, and after the deafening explosion, the house was no longer there. Not only was one house missing, but the surrounding houses were damaged to varying degrees and more than 30 meters away from the explosion. Many people were still injured. Boom. A cannonball landed on the city wall, directly blasting a gap in the solid city wall. A large number of bricks and wood were pushed around by the explosive airflow, causing tragic secondary damage. Scenes like this can be seen everywhere in the city of Salonika, and there are tragic images everywhere after being shot by the main guns of battleships. Such shelling made the Ottoman army feel uneasy. This kind of battle, where they could only be beaten, but not fight back, was very frustrating. This made some Ottoman soldiers who were not strong-willed enough to quietly take off their uniforms at this time and want to leave this purgatory-like place. If it weren't for the suppression by the gendarmerie in the city, they might not have wanted to protect the two armies from attacking, and they would have dispersed on their own. Don't think that only the Ottoman army is like this. Even if it is the army of other powers, in this environment, morale will still collapse. As for the tragic scene in the city, naturally everything was seen by Lieutenant General Aouzi, who was observing the movements from a certain height. He had previously expected the damage caused by enemy warships, but the current enemy firepower was far from what he expected. He found that none of the countermeasures he had previously imagined would be useful because he underestimated the power of the warship's artillery. Yes, he did underestimate it. But then again, it is indeed a bit difficult for an army officer to estimate the naval firepower. As for the shabby Ottoman navy, no reference can be provided at all. As for other countries, who would share this information with the Ottomans, and also with an army officer. So he underestimated, which is human nature. We can't continue like this. We must immediately convene a meeting with the commanders of each division. We need to consider a retreat. Lieutenant General Aouzi, who put down the telescope in his hand, suddenly said this. After being silent for a long time. His words frightened Major General Emily, the chief of staff beside him, who was at a loss. After being stunned for a while, he slowly spoke. Your Majesty Lieutenant General, we can definitely wait for the reinforcement sent by General Yilmaz. It's okay that Major General Emily didn't mention this, but once he mentioned it, Lieutenant General Aouzi immediately became furious. In this case, you ask me to wait for reinforcement. Do you know our current situation? The enemy warships are constantly destroying our city fortifications, and we are helpless. The enemy has surrounded us and wants to break out of the city. It becomes difficult, and where can we break through? We can retreat to Macedonia and join General Yilmaz's army. At this time, Major General Emily suddenly said this faced with the advice of his chief of staff. Lieutenant General Aouzi showed a disdainful expression. Retreating to Macedonia? I won't talk about the situation on the road. Under the current situation, you can let the soldiers break through the enemy's interception. Thinking of the scene they just saw on their side, it was indeed difficult for them to launch an offensive against the enemy, and Admiral Yilmaz is currently unable to protect himself. If we retreat, we will end up with the same fate. Lieutenant General Aouzi's sudden words made Major General Emily show a puzzled expression. Seeing his chief of staff's doubts, Lieutenant General Aouzi took out a telegram and said, originally, I wanted to tell you together later, but now that I've said it, you should take a look. This is what I received last night. Major General Emily received this telegram and was shocked when he saw it. This is the latest telegram. The telegram states that the Italian army has broken through the blockade of the 2nd Macedonian army in the Dinara Mountains, and that they have entered the Macedonian region. Yes, the Italian Balkan army finally lived up to its name. The assault group led by Lieutenant General Simeon, under constant attacks from heavy artillery and mountain infantry, finally defeated the enemy at the Kosovo Pass. They have entered the Macedonian region, and their vanguard is less than 15 kilometers away from the military town of Prilep. At this time, General Yilmaz can still come up with reinforcement, so reinforcement will be useful. Major General Emily would not understand what this telegram means. He collapsed on the ground all at once, with tears in his eyes. Compared with the frustration of the Salonican defenders, the Italian and Bulgarian armies were much calmer. As the commander of the Italian forces, Lieutenant General Grovi was even interested in inviting Major General Yuzunov, commander of the Bulgarian Third Army, to watch the naval-led bombardment with him. It's amazing. Without coastal defense, the enemy has no ability to defend itself against attacks from the sea. Major General Yuzunov looked at the steel behemoths on the sea with envy. These behemoths were constantly spraying tongues of fire. Naturally, the defenders of Salonika were suffering. Although Yuzunov envied Italy's powerful fleet, he knew that Bulgaria could not possess it, because Bulgaria's environment determines that they must ensure safety on land. Of course, the purchase of some heavy coastal defense artillery must be put on the agenda in the future. A port that lacks protection is as fragile as a piece of paper when faced with enemy sea attacks. Just when he was about to say something more, to praise the other party, suddenly a staff officer hurried over. What's the matter? Seeing this officer running directly towards him, Lieutenant General Grove quickly asked. Faced with the commander's question, the officer immediately responded. General, the garrison in the city requested to send someone to discuss peace matters with us. Although the officer said it very euphemistically, everyone knew that it was just a qualifying word, and the Salonik garrison wanted to surrender. The two commanders looked at each other and smiled. Being able to capture the city without any effort was a good thing. Of course we can talk about this, as long as the other party doesn't go too far. Tell The Ottomans, that Major General Yuzunov and I are at the headquarters, waiting for their envoy. With these words of Lieutenant General Grove, it was announced that the Italian and Italian armies were willing to accept the surrender of the defenders. And this news is excellent news for everyone in Salonika. Point. Only by experiencing the cruelty of the battlefield can we know the beauty of peace. Point. I cried. This is my second revision. It was originally corrected at 0:45, but the machine crashed, and I vomited 3 liters of blood. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237, Ottoman Sues for Peace. The surrender of the Salonika garrison was a turning point in this war, but in addition, what is even more worrying is that the Italian army has invaded Macedonia, the Ottoman Empire's current territories in Europe, except for East Thrace, where the capital Istanbul belongs, have existed for days. Regarding such a predicament, the Ottoman senior officials are of course anxious, but there is no use in just being anxious. They need to come up with a solution. Of course, it is not that the high-ranking Ottoman officials don't know the method, but no one of them mentioned this method, and no one dared to mention it. Point. Since the only solution cannot be said or mentioned, then they can only act like ostriches in danger, burying their heads in the sand, and pretending not to know anything. Point. But the Ottomans were not in a hurry, but others were anxious. Ambassadors from Britain, France, Russia, and Austria met with senior Ottoman officials one after another and expressed their hope that the Ottoman Empire could take time to end this war. Yes, the European powers that are not involved in the war are currently more anxious than the Ottoman Empire. Point. It is not difficult to guess the plans of their countries. Among them, Britain and France wanted to prevent the Ottomans from suffering serious losses, leading to chaos in the Near East, and giving other countries the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. As for Austria and Russia, they also do not want the Ottomans to suffer too much losses in this war, allowing the Balkan countries to take the opportunity to grow and get rid of their influence and control. Point. Even though Austria-Hungary had just obtained the legal rule of Bosnia and Herzegovina from the Ottomans, Russia and the Ottomans were still feuding. This will not delay them at this time, hoping that the Ottoman Empire will not die of excessive blood loss. Therefore, the situation in Macedonia was so bad, and with the help of other countries, the Ottoman Empire finally had to face the problem of defeat. Point. Located in the new palace in Istanbul, a topic about peace talks is being held here. Point. The superior Ottoman Sultan Ahmed II, looking at the senior officials gathered together, rarely spoke first. Yesterday, the ambassadors of Britain, France, Germany, and Austria came together to see me. They plan to mediate the war between our country and Italy and other countries. I wonder, ministers, what do you think of this matter? Although Sultan said it tactfully, no one present who was not a human spirit could not understand its intention. Point. It's just that these words are difficult to answer. No matter how you answer them, they will leave troubles. Therefore, the ministers in the hall did not know how to speak for a while. Point. But just when no one spoke, a minister suddenly came out. Everyone took a look and saw that this was not the Minister of War, Nuri Pasha. This person was rarely the first to speak. Point. Rather than making his colleagues sigh, the next words of Nuri Pasha were even more surprising. Point. I saw Nuri Pasha bending down slightly and speaking. Your Majesty, this war is currently very unfavorable to our country. As the direct commander of this war, our Ministry of War bears great responsibility, and I, the Minister of War, bear the main responsibility. For this reason, I sincerely request Your Majesty to remove my duty as to control the people's hearts. Nuri Pasha's sudden words surprised everyone. They did not expect that the Minister of War was so brave and directly willing to bear the main responsibility for the defeat. Point. But they soon saw why. Point. Faced with the Minister of War's move to take responsibility on himself, Ahmed II, the Sultan, looked at him and said, "You are indeed responsible for the defeat of this war. Since you realize your mistake, then step down from the post of Minister of War and let your deputy take over. You can become my military advisor." Well, this is not taking responsibility. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that this is the Sultan protecting the Ottoman marshal. to avoid possible liquidation in the future. Pick it out. First point, I really don't know what to say. The treatment given to my confidants is indeed extraordinary. There is no difference between resigning or not resigning. Nuri Pasha is still the #1 figure in the army. Of course, this also has a lot to do with his ability to win the trust of Sudan. After all, Sudan needs credible and capable people to sit in the army. However, although others could guess part of it, they still made others drool with envy. In particular, Grand Vizier Kamil Pasha, Foreign Minister Halim Pasha and others were the most envious because they knew they would be the ones to take the blame next. Someone needs to be able to bear the responsibility for this defeat. In addition, someone needs to be responsible for the failed negotiations. There is no more suitable candidate than these two. Sure enough, after the Minister of War was taken out, the Sultan's face immediately turned ugly. Why did we fail in this war? Grand Vizier, please tell me the reason. As the Sultan pointed out Kamil Pasha directly, many people breathed a sigh of relief. At least they no longer had to worry about their lives. After all, the main person in charge has been designated, and they are only jointly and severally liable at most, which is a great blessing among misfortunes. As for Kamil Pasha, who was named, he certainly knew why the Sultan asked for his name. Although he was indeed responsible for this war, the main responsibility really did not lie with him. However, this was no longer a question of whether he thought about it or not. Thinking about the survival of his family, he could only accept the Sultan's words. Your Majesty, the government bears a great responsibility for this defeat, especially the fact that I have failed to live up to His Majesty's expectations. For this reason, I implore your Majesty to take back my position as Grand Vizier. I'm willing to bear all the consequences. As Kamil Pasha said that he was willing to take responsibility, the mid-second's face became slightly better. Since you are willing to bear the responsibility for this defeat, I allow you to resign as Grand Vizier. However, considering that I do not have a suitable candidate yet, you will continue to serve until I have a candidate. Although the mid-second said something to persuade him to stay, this made Kamil Pasha's face even more bitter. Any failure to find a candidate is an excuse. It is obvious that the Sudan wants to leave the two leaders alone and let him take the blame for the negotiations. As long as the peace talks are reached, there will be no good results for him who has lost his power and humiliated the country. And he is still a scapegoat with no rights. Life is bleak like this, but as for the Sudan, can he object? Since you can't object, you can only accept it. Your Majesty, I will stick to my duties during this temporary period. After taking care of Kamil Pasha, the Ottoman Sultan's eyes began to patrol the crowd again, which made other ministers immediately frightened and uneasy. They were deeply afraid of being named at this time point, but soon most people breathed a sigh of relief. Halim Pasha, the next negotiations with various countries will be conducted by you. The foreign minister, Halim Pasha, who was named, felt depressed in his heart. He also could not refuse the task assigned by the Sultan. Now that the scapegoat was decided, the atmosphere of the following meeting became much better. The other ministers listened to the Sultan's instructions very seriously. Only Kamil Pasha and Halim Pasha were sad. Others intentionally or unintentionally stayed away from the two of them, as if they had an infectious disease. Then the news of Osman's request for an armistice and peace talks was sent out. Facing Ottoman's request for peace talks, Carlo, as the King of Italy, naturally welcomed it very much. Although the current situation is excellent, the interference from other countries has made Carlo plan to stop there. After all, Italy does not have many interests in the Balkans, so there is no need to trap itself in it. As Italy agreed to peace talks, Bulgaria and Montenegro, both allies, naturally had no choice but to stop. After all, they still need Italy's support to capture the fat war dividends. As for Greece and Serbia, since Italy and other countries have agreed to a ceasefire, it is naturally impossible for them not to agree. After all, the supporters behind each have already expressed their attitudes. Moreover, it was impossible to defeat the Ottoman Empire just relying on the strength of their two countries. Then, the war in the Balkans stopped, and then it depends on the efforts of diplomats. In this regard, Italy has enough confidence. Chapter 238 London Peace Talks 1. As countries prepare for peace talks, the first goal that needs to be achieved is the choice of the location for the negotiations according to Italy's wishes. Rome is naturally the best choice. However, other countries are unwilling to take this place, especially Greece and Serbia, which are the most fiercely opposed. After all, this is Italy's home court, and they don't want Italy, which has performed enough in this war, to still have the home court advantage point. Since these two countries desperately opposed it, Rome was defeated. At this time, there are enthusiastic countries willing to provide venues for peace talks. Britain offered London, France offered Paris, Germany offered Berlin, Austria-Hungary offered Vienna, and even Russia offered St. Petersburg and Moscow as choices for countries to be so enthusiastic. Not only can they increase their prestige in the world by placing the negotiation venue on their own side, but they can also build up the self-confidence of their citizens otherwise. Why so many countries are willing to provide peace negotiation venues in the future is also a consideration in this regard. However, among the many locations here, it is not easy to choose one that satisfies everyone. After several days of wrangling and disputes, London became the location accepted by various countries. Now that the location has been decided, everyone has nothing to say. Naturally, they each brought their negotiation teams and prepared to go to London to fight for the interests of their respective countries. The negotiators that Italy is preparing to send this time are led by Prime Minister Desperatus and assisted by Foreign Minister Boccona. Before leaving, Carlo, as the king, came to the port to see them off in person in order to show the importance he attached to them. You, too, this peace negotiation depends on you. Carlo held the hands of the two of them and said what he expected from them in a serious voice. Of course, it is very reasonable for Italy to take the lead in this war. This war was led by Italy. Although Bulgaria and Montenegro performed well, their strength could only achieve the results promised to them. Apart from that, it was impossible to get additional rewards. This is not because Italy wants to regret it, but because off-field factors have too much influence this time. Countries such as Britain, France, Austria, and Russia have exerted tremendous pressure. Italy must prioritize ensuring its own results. Although the four countries of Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia, and Montenegro still launched the Balkan War in the previous life, the times are different after all, and there is a gap of more than 20 years of development, so the strength of the four countries is still far inferior to that before the First World War. Not to mention, there is an additional Italian this time, which will naturally only shrink their results facing the king's personal farewell. The two heads of delegation also immediately expressed their opinions. Your Majesty, please rest assured that we will definitely protect Italy's interests. No one can make Italy retreat. In recent years, with Carlo's influence, senior Italian officials have become more confident. What gives them confidence is Italy's strength. After years of development, although the debt burdened by Italy has not been reduced, its strength has been greatly improved compared to the original time and space. Occupying two colonies, East Africa and Lanfang, domestic industry is booming, the economic situation is getting better year by year, and the army has performed well in previous wars. So no matter how you look at it, Italy is thriving. This has caused many overseas newspapers to exclaim that Italy is on the right track of development. In this case, Italy needs to have results that match its strength. During yesterday's discussion, Carlo drew the bottom line of the peace talks, which is that Albania and Libya must be owned by Italy. In addition, it is necessary to make Crete independent, and if there is a chance, then win some Ottoman islands as a result. As for other Ottoman territories in the Balkans, let other countries grab them. Carlo never thought of going deep into the Balkans anyway. Although other Italian officials are very greedy, they can only eat as much as they can. Carlo did not want to be regarded as a competitor by Austria-Hungary and Russia, so let them bite the bullet. Italy should choose some places where it is easy to make profits, so Carlo is not nervous now, because Italy really has no intention of intervening in the Balkans. However, of course he will not publicize this idea. He also plans to use this opportunity to exchange interests with other countries. Just as Carlo was talking with the delegation to see them off, an attendant hurried over with a telegram. The captain of the guard immediately greeted the attendant when he saw it. This is an urgent telegram from Berlin and must be handed over to His Majesty immediately. As the attendant spoke, Ferimage glanced at the telegram and his expression immediately changed. Ignoring the expressions of others, he hurriedly walked up to Carlo and whispered a few words, listening to the captain of the guards whisper. Even the well-educated Carlo couldn't help but frown. Is the news reliable? Very reliable. This was sent personally by the ambassador to Germany. The two people's nonsense words left the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary a little confused. Facing the two people who looked confused, Carlo decided to tell them the news. Anyway, they would know it before long. Then he spoke. This is news from Berlin. Chancellor Bismarck has resigned. What? Facing Carlo's words, the two of them asked this question in unison. No way. This news is too shocking. You must know that this is Bismarck. He has been in charge of Germany for decades. His outstanding diplomacy and maneuvering have brought Germany from division to unity and made Germany gradually stronger. How could such a prime minister with such great achievements suddenly resign without any news? Although others couldn't figure it out, how could Carlo, who had the memory of later generations, not understand? Doesn't this mean that the conflict with the new Kaiser has become irreconcilable? Otherwise, how could this energetic and iron-blooded prime minister resign? Of course, it was impossible to say this from his mouth. After all, until World War I, William II had always held power in Germany. He would only say it out loud if he was crazy. Italy still needs Germany, a powerful ally, to protect itself from the wind and rain. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Bismarck's resignation will affect our most important ally after all. Do you want us to keep one of them to inquire about the situation in Germany? As Foreign Minister, Bacona was still very diplomatically sensitive and immediately asked Carlo for his opinion. No, I will handle this matter. The most important thing to us at the moment is the peace talks in London, and we need you more. Carlo rejected the Foreign Secretary's suggestion because he believed that this matter would not affect the relationship between Germany and Italy, so negotiations in London were still important. So next, although various countries are making an uproar over Bismarck's resignation, Italy is still paying attention to the next negotiations in London. The same goes for other participating countries. They are all eyeing the peace talks in London. Chapter 239 London Peace Trial 2. Although Bismarck's resignation caused a sensation, it still could not stop the peace talks in London from proceeding. Although Bismarck has a huge reputation in the world, all countries are realistic. In addition to the private sector, governments of all countries have set their sights on the new German Prime Minister. Of course, the London peace talks, which are related to the situation in the Balkans, are also focused on as one of the famous palaces in London. Kensington Palace was also where Queen Victoria originally lived. However, the Queen no longer lives here and has moved to Buckingham Palace. In this peace negotiation, the United Kingdom offered Kensington Palace as the venue for the negotiations, which also shows the sincerity of the British. As representatives from various countries arrived in London one after another, negotiations were finally about to begin. But before starting, the victorious countries represented by Italy have a problem that needs to be solved. And that is how each country divides the results of the war. Yes, it is necessary to divide the results of the war. This extra step was caused by the sudden emergence of Serbia and Greece into the war. There is no need to talk about this issue at this time. The main thing is to coordinate the requirements of various countries before negotiating with the Ottoman delegation. After all, the conditions of various countries are very likely to overlap. If they are not discussed in advance, it will not be allowed to the Ottoman delegation. Are you kidding me? So before the formal peace talks, a negotiation excluding the Ottoman Empire began. First point, located in the conference room of Kensington Palace, delegations from various countries are sitting together. Due to the large number of countries, only the chief and deputy heads of delegations can sit at the table. No one else can enter except for a secretary each to take notes. The conference room. Sitting beside the conference room were envoys from various powers, who were responsible for listening and witnessing the entire peace talks process. After announcing the start of negotiations, Bacona, the Italian foreign minister, spoke out about Italy's demands. Our country's request is that the Ottoman Empire must annex the Libyan region of North Africa and the entire Albania region. In addition, Crete must be independent, and our country needs to supervise the southern 12 islands represented by Rhodes Island. The conditions put forward by all parties in this war are also in order. As the largest contributor to this war, and the strongest party, Italy ranks first, and no one dares to express dissatisfaction. However, although no one was dissatisfied with Italy's ranking, there was immediate opposition to Boccane's words. Our country firmly opposes your request for the independence of Crete, because this has always been Greek territory. It was the foreign minister of the Greek delegation, Mavros, who spoke out against this. The middle-aged man sitting diagonally across the long table said in an extremely angry tone, "As we all know, the local residents of Crete are all Greeks, so what is Italy's intention in making it independent?" What Mavros said was justified, and what he said was a fact known to all countries. It's just that many things can't be obtained by showing facts and evidence. Boccone looked at the other party and said, "So, according to your opinion, Latin America should be under Spanish rule. Brazil should also be under Portugal." Faced with Boccane's pretentious words, Mavros was so angry that he trembled all over and blurted out, "You are just being ridiculous. Latin America has been independent for many years, and not all of them are descendants of Spain and Portugal. Their respective cultures and languages are also different." The words of the Greek foreign minister made Boccone smile. Latin America has been independent for less than 100 years, so the language and culture are different. So, how long has Crete been separated from your country, and why do you think Crete should belong to your country? And Crete we already have an autonomous government, and have declared a declaration of independence. Why do you think so arrogantly that you want the Cretans to want to merge with you? Have you ever asked the locals for their opinions? Obviously, it is impossible for Italy to let Crete belong to Greece and directly remove the topic of Cretan autonomy. Mavros spoke directly to the Italian foreign minister in front of him, who refused to admit his guilt. That autonomous government is just a puppet that you support, and does not represent the local people of Crete at all. Faced with accusations from the Greek foreign minister, others knew bad, because in this case, such accusations require evidence. Sure enough, Boccane's face darkened, and he looked at the other party coldly. "Since you say that we have manipulated the autonomous government of Crete, please provide evidence. If you cannot provide evidence, then our country has reason to suspect that your country is conducting diplomatic slander against our country, and the consequences will need to be expensive. The country is responsible for it." This sentence immediately made the conference room feel extremely quiet. At this time, representatives from other countries opened their eyes wide and looked at the reaction of the Greek delegation. Even the Serbian delegation, its ally, is unwilling to speak at this time because it will offend the currently powerful Italians and be very detrimental to its subsequent negotiations. As for the negotiators from other countries, they looked like they were watching a good show, and they wanted the Greeks to lose face. As for Mavros, the client, he has been forced into a corner. No matter whether he can provide evidence or not, the other party has already elevated this to the level of country-to-country diplomacy, and his current evidence is simply insufficient. But then again, with sufficient evidence, can Greece take back Crete from Italy? But at this time a voice helped him relieve his embarrassment. "Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece, this is just an unintentional mistake. There is no need for Your Excellency Boccone to get too hung up on this." The person who spoke was the new British Foreign Secretary Sir Wilson, who directly said that this was an unintentional remark made by the Greek foreign minister. The bystander was not supposed to come forward, but the Greek was so useless that he had to be made to speak. Facing the attitude of the British, Italy must give enough face. Since it was an unintentional mistake, Mr. Mavros had better think carefully next time. Dropping this sentence also means letting this matter go. After beating the first place Greeks, no one objected to Italy's submission. Since no one objects, this also means that all countries acquiesce to Italy's conditions. Next it was the Bulgarians' turn. Because in this war, Bulgaria's contribution was second only to Italy, so they must be the second to propose conditions. Of course, Italy also contributed a lot. Bulgarian Foreign Minister Popkov stood up and spoke slowly. "Our demand is simple. The Ottoman Empire must hand over Macedonia to our country as compensation." Chapter 240 London Peace Talks 3. Although Popkov just said this, it immediately aroused fierce opposition. "Our country firmly opposes your request. 1/3 of the Macedonian region is occupied by our people and cannot be occupied by your country alone. This request of your country tramples on the dignity of our country. The person who spoke so righteously was the foreign minister Jeremic from Serbia. The foreign minister, who was a lawyer, stood up angrily and accused the Bulgarians of unreasonable demands. In addition to the Serbs, the Greeks also oppose the Bulgarian demands. Your country's request is too unreasonable, and our country cannot accept it either. That's right. Apart from allowing themselves to tear off a piece of flesh from the Ottomans as a victorious country, the other main purpose of the two countries' participation in the peace talks is not to allow Bulgaria to gain too many benefits. If Bulgaria gets too much, the balance between the three countries will be broken. This is a scene that no one wants to see. Point facing the opposition from the delegations of Serbia and Greece. Bulgaria is obviously also prepared. Popkov spoke. It is reasonable for our country to acquire the Macedonian region. You must know that Macedonia was our original territory before this. In addition, many local people have always had relations with our country. Many of their relatives and friends are in our country. I think that regardless of the national history or language and culture, considering the above, all Macedonia should belong to our country. Although Popkov said it wonderfully, how could Serbia and Greece allow Bulgaria to obtain the Macedonian region? I saw Mavris, who had been teased by Bacona just now, speaking with contempt. In terms of history, our country is no worse than yours. During the time of Alexander the Great, Macedonia was a part of our country, and this region was also deeply influenced by our country in terms of culture and customs. From all aspects, it should belong to our country. When he heard that the other party shamelessly put the founder of the Macedonian Empire, Alexander the Great, on the head of his country, Popkov was surprised by the shamelessness of the Greeks. You are so shameless. Who are you talking about? Talking about you. Seeing that the venue was about to turn into scolding, and feeling the need to stop it, British Foreign Secretary Sir Wilson knocked on the table. Everyone, please calm down. This is a negotiation, not a quarrel. After all, it was the British Empire that had more dignity. Facing Sir Wilson, the melee between the three countries stopped immediately. Afterwards, Sir Wilson whispered to the envoys from several other countries, and then to Despotis, the head of the Italian delegation. Faced with this situation, delegations from several Balkan countries only heard a few words from Prime Minister Despotis. That's okay. After whispering to Prime Minister Despotis, Sir Wilson then spoke. Since the Macedonia region is of great importance and involves too many countries, can we skip this topic and continue to listen to the conditions of other countries? Although this is a question, but combined with the previous words of the Italian Prime Minister, who cannot understand it, there was a roar of approval, except for the Bulgarian delegation. The leader of the Bulgarian team, Prime Minister Stambolov, cast a questioning look at Despotis, but he suppressed it with a calm gesture. Since the hotspot area of Macedonia has been skipped, it is the turn of Serbia and Greece to speak next. They stated their country's requirements one after another. In addition to the Ottoman region of Epirus, Greece also claimed Western Macedonia. As for Serbia, it announced that it would add the Ottomans' Latibor corridor to itself. This corridor is an important link between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Macedonia, which is very beneficial to the expansion of Serbia's territory. In addition, the valley section of the upper reaches of the Morava River and parts of northern Macedonia are within the scope of Serbia's declaration. Compared with these two countries, the Montenegrin delegation led by the Grand Duke of Montenegro Nicholas I is much more low-key this time. They only need to be close to the 6,000 square kilometers of diameter area in Montenegro. Well, now the conditions claimed by the countries in the Balkan Peninsula seriously overlap, the most serious of which is Macedonia. After all parties had finished speaking, Prime Minister Despotis suddenly spoke as a representative of Italy. I took a look at the scope of the requirements of each country. I don't want to express any opinions on this, but I have something to ask the representatives of Serbia and Greece. Facing the most powerful people from all parties involved this time, the representatives of the two countries knew that what was coming next would definitely not be good, but they could only ask the question. I wonder what Prime Minister Despotis wants to ask. Nothing. I just want to ask what contribution the two countries made to this war. Which important town did you capture, or which Ottoman army did you annihilate? Depretis almost said directly that the two countries had no contribution to this war, so how could they have the nerve to ask for so much? Even though the delegations of the two countries were thick-skinned, they were still irritated by these words. As for the Bulgarian delegation on the side, they felt very relieved when they saw this scene. The two countries just declared a war and then occupied some border cities that had been abandoned by the Ottomans. They actually had the audacity to make so many demands. If it weren't for the three countries of Britain, Austria, and Russia standing behind it, it would have been repaired long ago. At this time, facing the sudden display of power from the Italians, Sir Wilson, who knew that the two countries could not resist it, glanced at the representatives of Russia and Austria sitting next to him, but the representatives of these two countries were completely motionless. Sir Wilson, who could only stand up on his own, tried to smooth things over. Every country has put forward its own plan, and everyone has understood each other, so I think the morning's discussion is almost done. Otherwise we can discuss it in the afternoon. Regarding Sir Wilson's proposed delaying method, the representatives of the two countries immediately commented, "Sir, that's very good. I didn't eat much in the morning, so I'm a little hungry. Just listen to Sir's advice. We don't have any objection either." Faced with this situation, the talks could only be suspended. Then the delegations from various countries walked out of the venue one after another, and naturally, Italy, Bulgaria and Montenegro came together. Moreover, the two prime ministers and the Grand Duke came together, obviously discussing something, and other members of the delegation naturally fell behind them. After walking to a deserted corner, Depretis spoke openly to Montenegro. "Your Highness Nicholas, our country will definitely support your country's request." The discerning Grand Duke of Montenegro immediately thanked him cheerfully. "Thanks to my friends from Italy for their selfless help. I will leave first." After seeing off the Grand Duke of Montenegro, Depretis continued, "Why didn't your country tell our country that you wanted the whole of Macedonia? This made our country very passive. Yes, Italy has said that it will win Macedonia for Bulgaria, but not the entire Macedonia. The entire Macedonia area is more than 70,000 square kilometers, which is larger than Serbia and Greece. If such a territory is obtained by Bulgaria, the two countries will stop fighting. Bulgaria will be the powerful country in the Balkans, not to mention Serbia and Greece. Even Italy will not agree." Faced with Depretis' question, Bulgarian Prime Minister Stambolov opened his mouth to explain. "Our country mainly announced that it wants the entire Macedonia in order to have a way out in subsequent negotiations." Regarding the Bulgarian Prime Minister's explanation, Depretis stopped thinking about whether it was reasonable or not, and continued to speak. "Your Excellency needs to pay attention. I have a hunch that the most you can get is the Northern Macedonia region, and this is with the support of our country." Faced with Depretis' words, Stambolov looked surprised. "How is it possible? Our country is the second largest contributor." Faced with the Bulgarian Prime Minister's exclamation, Depretis said nothing, patted the other party on the shoulder, and left. Because when he said in Bulgaria that he wanted the whole of Macedonia, when he saw the special envoys of Austria and Russia, his expression immediately turned ugly, and then the two of them actually started talking. It is obvious that Bulgaria's good appetite unites the two Balkan competitors, Austria and Russia. Under such circumstances, if Bulgaria can get Northern Macedonia, it is already a very good result. Chapter 241 London Peace Talks 4. In the ensuing negotiations, as Depretis said, in response to Bulgaria's requirements, except for the two countries, all parties who were originally just spectators came on stage. However, the main ones are Austria, Hungary and Russia. These two countries exert various pressures on Bulgaria, from verbal warnings to naked and explicit statements, and they simply want to suppress all Bulgaria's demands. Prime Minister Stambolov, who is the head of the Bulgarian delegation, is even more busy dealing with him. Even though he is called the Bismarck of Bulgaria, he is not really Bismarck after all, and Bulgaria is not as powerful as Prussia. Therefore, in the face of pressure from all parties, Bulgaria retreated steadily. Its demands started from the entire Macedonia region and retreated all the way to Northern Macedonia. However, other countries are still not satisfied. They want Bulgaria to take only half of North Macedonia's territory. At this time, the Italian representative came to power, and Prime Minister Depretis fully supported Bulgaria's request at this time. Although Italy is still worse than Austria, Hungary and Russia, it at least gives Bulgaria some confidence. Italy's support allowed Bulgaria to retain part of northern Macedonia. Because the Ottomans still retained Kosovo, they left a channel in North Macedonia. Of course, as compensation, Central Macedonia set aside a piece of land as compensation for Bulgaria. Since Bulgaria's demands have been suppressed to such a low level, Serbia and Greece, as the spoilers, have not gained much. Among them, Serbia has only received the Zlatiba corridor, while Greece has only received the Epirus region. Only the Kingdom of Montenegro, due to its small size and few needs, was not targeted, and took all the Dermata region adjacent to the country. Of course, these small countries all received less, so Italy, as the initiator of the war, had to make appropriate concessions, and the southern 12 islands were also given up. However, Italy's main targets, Albania and the Libyan region of North Africa, were recognized by all countries. Of course, independent Crete also acquiesced at Italy's insistence. In general, the requirements of Italy and Montenegro have been basically met this time. Greece and Serbia took the opportunity to expand a little bit of their territory, while Bulgaria only got about 1/3 of Macedonia. None of the three Balkan countries were too satisfied, but they had to accept it under the pressure of the major powers. Now that the conditions of each country have been unified, the next step is to negotiate with the Ottomans. So a week later, it was still the same conference room, with an additional negotiator named Osman. This is the peace condition for the countries participating in the war. You too can take a look at it. The speaker was Italian Foreign Minister Boccona. He looked condescendingly at the Ottoman representative representing the defeated country, and handed him the peace treaty after the reunification of the countries. One more thing, this is our final condition, and we will not, and are unwilling to change a word. Facing Boccona's words, Halim Pasha and Kamal Pasha, who were the scapegoats of the Ottomans, took over the peace treaty that had been drawn up with expressionless faces, and began to look at it one by one. The first is for all countries participating in the war, to cease all military operations. 2. Unless otherwise specified, all military movements in warring areas such as Macedonia, Thrace, and Kosovo shall be suspended, with the exception of military movements necessary for supplies, administration, and local security. 3. The Ottomans ceded Libya, Albania, North Macedonia, except Skopje, Kočani and Stepnica, the Zlatiba corridor, and Dermata in Central Macedonia to other countries participating in the war. Also Crete is independent. 4. The Ottomans must withdraw all military and religious personnel from the outlined areas. Local officials can wait until they receive state mandate before withdrawing. 5. In addition, taking into account ethnic, religious and other factors, people in the above mentioned areas have 3 months of free choice. They can freely choose the country they want to go to, and the new government in the area must not use threats or other means to stop it. 6. In addition, in view of the heavy losses caused by the war in the area, the Ottomans invested 60 million Ottoman liras, less than £6 million, as aid funds to help the local disaster-stricken people resume production and life. Of course, there are also some treaties such as the exchange of prisoners of war, counting of losses, etc. These various contracts, which add up to 16 articles, constitute the outcome of the London peace talks. As representatives of the Ottomans, Halim Pasha and Kamal Pasha watched very slowly and asked questions from time to time when they didn't understand something. Representatives from other countries just waited quietly. However, no matter how you look at it, it will not look like a flower. After more than an hour, the 2 Ottoman representatives finally finished reading. Only then did Kamal Pasha speak. We have read your conditions, but we need to send a telegram to Istanbul to inform them of the content of the negotiations. Faced with the words of the Ottoman representative, Prime Minister Depretis, who is the head of the Italian delegation, spoke out. You are free to do so, but it is best to be quick. If we know that your country is trying to use this time to make small moves, then the war will continue, and your 200,000 officers and soldiers in Macedonia will suffer more serious consequences. Yes, this is a naked threat. Let the Ottomans know that they still have 200,000 troops surrounded by various countries. He knew that the other party was a threat, but these 200,000 troops were the hard work of the Ottoman army, and Kemal Pasha, as the Grand Vizier, could bow his head. Don't worry, we will respond as soon as possible. This was the end of the first negotiation with the Ottomans. Of course, no one from each country expected the other party to respond immediately. Peace talks, even if they don't last for a month or two, they can still be considered peace talks, although this time the other party will not be given a chance to bargain. It will still take at least half a month. Now that the other party has left, why are they still here? The Italian delegation, represented by Prime Minister Despotis, stood up first, followed closely by the delegations of Bulgaria and Montenegro, and the three countries left gracefully. After the three countries left, the Greek and Serbian delegations looked at each other and also stood up and left. The demands of Italy and the Balkan countries were quickly conveyed back to Istanbul. Of course, Halim Pasha and Kemal Pasha never thought that the country would give them instructions. They just wanted to let the country know the other party's conditions. Sure enough, in the evening of that day, a telegram was sent from Istanbul, telling them to make their own decision. Now the two of them don't know what to do. So the subsequent negotiations went quickly, and a week later, the two men signed the treaty. This made all countries breathe a sigh of relief. As long as the governments of all countries sign the peace treaty, it will take effect. Chapter 242 Al-Shabaab riots. Istanbul, the Ottoman capital, has always been known as the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Such excellent conditions have always attracted many peoples in the city. From the ancient tribal mountain people to the modern powers, everyone tried to control this city. As for modern times, the city is under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Even though it is about to become a border city, the Ottomans are still reluctant to part with the unique and superior conditions here. But now there is an undercurrent emerging in Istanbul. The reason is that the Ottoman people were outraged by the defeated treaty. On the streets, people have been discussing the treaty to cede land and pay compensation. Do you know what? Do you know the empire lost the war, and I heard that it cut off most of the territory in Europe and Africa. How could this happen? How could the empire lose so much? No one expected that we would lose money when we heard that there were still 200,000 imperial troops surrounded by enemies in Macedonia. Words like this are being circulated everywhere in Istanbul. Thanks to the outstanding Ottoman bureaucracy, the contents of the peace talks were quickly spread. Such words are considered good, but the rumors are getting more and more outrageous, saying that even Istanbul cannot be saved. Such content about the defeat that was spread everywhere was naturally spread to the military camp. The Zeytinburnu military camp located southwest of Istanbul is the largest military camp in the capital. There are only more than 30,000 Ottoman troops stationed here on weekdays. However, due to the outbreak of the war, in order to strengthen the defense of the capital, nearly 50,000 officers and soldiers are currently stationed in the military camp. Naturally, the officers and soldiers in the military camp had also learned about the conditions for ceding territory and paying compensation after defeat. Such humiliating defeat conditions made the young Ottoman officers extremely dissatisfied, and this dissatisfaction surged in the military camp. On this day, a large number of officers were crowded in a warehouse of the 29th Division Independent Engineer Battalion located in the northwest corner of the military camp. These wearers were officers at the lieutenant level or even at the school level, crowded in the warehouse, listening to the speech of a young man on the stage. Like-minded friends, if you are here, it means you are a person who truly loves this country, and I'm also one of them. Are you willing to see the land cessation and compensation for the empire's defeat this time? I don't want to. The deafening sound seemed to overturn the huge warehouse. Since no one is willing, how can we accept the cause created by Suleiman the Magnificent and be oppressed again and again by European bandits? Like-minded friends, we must not let the Ottoman Empire sink like this. We need to change, we need to strengthen ourselves, and we need to show Europeans that we are not sick men. We absolutely cannot accept such humiliating conditions, and would rather shed the last drop of blood than lose a piece of Ottoman territory. We will never allow a piece of territory to be lost, even if our blood is shed dry. The Atmosphere at the scene reached a climax. Everyone was roaring, and they wanted to vent their dissatisfaction. And Amdriza looked at these young officers who had the same dream as him, and he felt that the opportunity to change Osman was right in front of him. Although I feel a little rushed, time is not waiting for me, and I can't wait any longer. Amdriza studied in Paris before, and was very envious of French liberal democratic ideas. He believes that the reason why the Ottomans fell behind is precisely because of institutional problems. Only by ending the autocratic rule and decentralizing power will the Ottoman Empire gain greater national cohesion, which can promote the growth of social economy and strength. One more thing, Amdriza is currently the leader of the Ottoman Youth Party. Yes, it is the youth party that launched the bourgeois revolution in Ottoman. In fact, in addition to the Al-Shabaab, there are currently many people who are dissatisfied in the Ottoman country. Like the one in the Far East, Ottoman young people are more disappointed with the country, and the national ideas coming from Europe have attracted a lot of people. Young people who want to change the country. Otherwise, how could he have spread his ideas so widely in just 1 or 2 years? It also allows the army to have so many supporters after everyone's emotions rose. Riza continued. Since everyone is willing to bleed and die for the Ottomans, we cannot let the Sultan sign the treaty. We need to let the monarch know our wishes, so we must let our voices be heard. At this time, someone asked in the audience, so how do we make our voices heard in Sudan? This is a very good question, Riza said immediately. We are going to take to the streets and go to the palace to let the Sultan understand that we do not want to see Osman sink like this, and we want to win his support. You read that right. Riza, who advocates liberal democratic ideas, proposed that everyone petition. In fact, this was something he had no choice about. If he directly claimed to take away the Sultan's power, half of the officers involved would be able to do so. At this time, the Ottoman Sultan still had prestige. Although the Ottomans had become increasingly weaker over the years, the education they received since childhood prevented them from directly opposing the Sultan. Even within the youth party represented by Riza, many people believe that the Sultanate cannot be abolished and that the Ottoman Empire must have monarch. But the power of the monarch should be limited. At this time, the officers who had been agitated did not even think about the difference between such an action and forcing the palace soldiers to remonstrate. Of course, there were many such things in Ottoman history, including the abolition of a sultan and the establishment of a new monarch. That's why Riza's proposal was accepted by everyone. Now that you have decided to take to the streets to protest, you need to make preparations next. Thanks to the current habits of the Ottoman army, mid-level and senior officers have their own residences, and they basically or rarely spend the night in the military camp. So this gave the junior officers the opportunity to encourage the soldiers. These young and daring officers also acted very quickly. They decided to force the palace soldiers to give advice, and did it as soon as they said it. When to start, the route of action, etc. were quickly completed. During this time, middle and senior military officers rarely came to the military camp because the peace treaty was about to be signed, so they were really fooled. Early in the morning on the third day, a large number of Ottoman soldiers, led by officers, took to the streets. They held high banners demanding that such a humiliating peace treaty be signed, and they vigorously protested to Sultan Abdulhamid. Set off to the new palace of Dolmabas where Emperor II lived. The chain reaction brought about by Carlo's butterflies constantly expanding. I cried. It was too late. It was a waste of a vacation slip. I couldn't afford to take a vacation this month. Chapter 243. Just in case. Ottoman troops marched against the signing of the defeat treaty, and the news spread to various countries as soon as possible. Countries reacted differently to the news. Among them, countries such as Britain, France, Austria, and Russia were so angry that they just wanted to curse. After finally getting the best conditions for Osman, now he is facing the possibility of total ruin. Faced with this situation, Britain, France, Austria, Russia and other countries certainly did not just sit back and curse. They immediately contacted the envoys in Istanbul and asked them to mobilize all their forces to stop the demonstrations from the army. It's just unclear how effective this will be. However, compared to countries such as Britain, France, Austria, and Russia. Italy and the Balkan countries participating in the war cheered. In particular, Bulgaria, which has long been dissatisfied with this, issued a statement that, if Osman overturns the results of the previous peace talks, the consequences will be borne by Osman himself. As for Serbia and Greece, they are somewhat ambivalent about this. Osman overturns the results of previous negotiations, which will give the two countries reason to continue tearing off a piece of flesh from Osman. But compared to them, Bulgaria will gain more benefits, which puts them in a dilemma point. But no matter what the small Balkan countries think, if they continue to fight the Ottomans, they still have to look at Italy's opinion. Therefore, Italy's current attitude has become a key point, which has also led to frequent contacts with the Italian government from various countries, hoping to get some news. Your Excellency Fulham, our country currently has no other views on the matter in Istanbul. Everything needs to wait until Osman himself decides. Prime Minister Despotis, who had just returned to Rome, spoke diplomatically to the British ambassador to Rome, Fulham, in his office. Fulham, who failed to get the news from the Italian Prime Minister, said with regret, Prime Minister Despotis, please don't let the Balkan people suffer anymore. Our country is very concerned about this. Please rest assured that our country will inform your country after it makes a decision. After sending the British ambassador out, Prime Minister Despotis rubbed his somewhat dry eyes. He has met with many ambassadors in the past few days, whether they are from the Balkans or from great powers such as Britain, France, Germany, Austria, and Russia. They all have only one purpose, and that is to know what Italy thinks of the mutiny that broke out in Istanbul. Although he also wanted to inform them, he, as the Prime Minister, did not know the actual situation. Because this matter is of great importance, it is still under discussion. Despotis looked at the pile of documents on the table that he had not had time to process and couldn't help but reveal a wry smile. These were all work delayed by frequent visits, and just when he was about to start processing these documents, there was a sudden knock on the door. Which ambassador is visiting again? Faced with being disturbed, Despotis became a little angry, so his tone of voice was no longer as calm as before. Prime Minister, there is news from the palace. His Majesty is looking for you. The words of the secretary outside the door made Despotis immediately calm down, because if he was looking for him at this time, it must be about Istanbul. Prepare the car immediately. Let's go to the palace. When the Prime Minister arrived at the palace, he realized that there were a lot of people this time. In addition to him and the foreign secretary, there were also several big bosses in the military. The young King Carlo was sitting on a chair, communicating quietly with the Minister of War. Faced with this situation, Despotis casually apologized. Sorry, I'm late due to traffic jam. After seeing that the Prime Minister had arrived, Carlo stood up and said, now that everyone is here, let's first understand the latest situation in Istanbul. Following Carlo's words, the captain of the guard, Filmik, stood up and explained the situation in Istanbul. At present, the situation in Istanbul has gradually calmed down. The mutiny led by the Ottoman Youth Party has taken control of it. The Grand Vizier Kamal Pasha and the Foreign Minister Halim Pasha and their families who participated in the negotiations previously, already executed by al-Shabaab for betraying Ottoman interests. The head guard paused here to let the people present digest the news. In addition, Ottoman Sultan Ahmed II has authorized Ahmed Riza, who led the mutiny, to be the new Minister of War. In addition, Jawad Pasha has been appointed Grand Vizier, and, after Felici finished talking about the changes in the top management of this mutiny, Despotis spoke. So, the mutiny in Istanbul has caused a major change in the Ottoman leadership. So what about the conditions negotiated before? I don't know about this, but judging from the contents of the mutiny, there is a high probability that they will not admit it. After hearing Felimaki's answer, the people at the scene fell into silence for a while, and it seemed that there would be more fighting to come. At this time, Carlo, the King of Italy, spoke. Everyone, this is the Ottomans' own choice. Then we will meet their requirements. Yes, there are currently a group of young men in Italy who are beating up Osman, the sick man of the Near East, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Seeing that the fighting spirit of everyone present was rekindled, Carlo continued. General Surrogate, please tell us about your army's response plan. Okay, Your Majesty. I saw General Surrogate uncovering the map covered by a cloth on the side, holding the baton and speaking. The Ministry of War has done this before. I think it is time to let you know the next battle plan, if the Ottomans do not accept it. According to the plan, the Balkan army group currently in the Balkans will be divided into 3 divisions after the war resumes. The troops set off from the Cook's Pass and captured the Kosovo area as quickly as possible. There were currently only 2 Ottoman divisions in the area, formed by fresh troops, and they would be no match. After capturing Kosovo, except for the 2 divisions left to defend the area, the remaining 1 division moved closer to Skopje after joining the Montenegrin and Bulgarian 4th Army. Then, together with the main force of the Balkan army, they surrounded and annihilated the main Ottoman forces gathered in the city. Our ally Bulgaria is responsible for blocking the Ottoman army in eastern Thrace. Wait until our army has annihilated the Macedonian enemies, and then reinforce them to try to capture Istanbul in one fell swoop. In addition, in order to prevent the Ottomans from being occupied, they still refuse to accept defeat, and refuse to surrender. The amphibious mobile force composed of the Guards and the Marine Corps will no longer participate in the battle in the Balkan Peninsula, but will turn to occupy the Ottoman Islands and the Aegean Sea, and wait for the opportunity to land on the Asian Peninsula, to draw the war into the Ottoman interior. Everyone pays attention to what General Surrogate said. In his words, Serbia and Greece were not mentioned at all. This shows that Italy, Bulgaria, and Montenegro do not want these 2 countries to intervene in this war. Therefore, although these 2 countries were nominally participating countries, the 3 countries did not give them a chance to perform. Since there is no chance to perform, what reason do they have to continue to compete for the subsequent spoils? Even if there are other powers standing behind them, they still need to have a chance to perform. After General Surrogate finished speaking, Carlo said, of course this is just our plan for emergencies. If the Ottomans accept it, then this plan will still not be implemented, although Carlo said it as if this plan was of no use. In fact, everyone knew that this was a high probability event. Can al-Shabaab, which just seized power by relying on the terms of opposition to defeat, really abandon the Ottoman soldiers and civilians who support it? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244, Reigniting the War. The formerly noisy Istanbul has gradually returned to calm, but its residents can still feel the difference from the past. Apart from anything else, there are more officers and soldiers in the city, and the patrols of a large number of officers and soldiers have made the city's security much better. Those scoundrels who were begging for food on the streets were all huddled at home. However, although Istanbul has become different, Hamd Riza, as the new Ottoman Minister of War, has been staying in the Ministry of War during this period, consulting the information of the Ministry of War in detail. These days of busyness, forgetting sleep and food, naturally allowed Riza to understand the army more thoroughly, and because of this, he felt that the previous slogan had become a hot potato. Currently, there are not many guns and ammunition stored in the army warehouse. In addition, the new recruits are not only lacking weapons, they are also lacking everything, from military uniforms and quilts to marching pots and even military boots. Many new recruits are still wearing their own uniforms, and if they carry guns, they will look like bandits robbing homes and homes. These tasks require coordination, distribution, and procurement by the army department. These tasks keep the lights of the army department on all night long, and officers can be seen at any time because of their busy schedule. Hamd Riza, who had just squinted for a while, washed his face with cold water to sober up, then continued to sit behind his desk and started to work. Bang, bang, bang. A knock on the door disrupted his thoughts. What's up? Riza, who was forced to withdraw from work, raised his head and asked, Your Excellency, Your Excellencies Sabar al-Din and Hamd Riza are here to visit. The Two men mentioned by the secretary are Rizza's right-hand men. Although Rizza became the Minister of War after the mutiny, other members of the Al-Shabaab currently do not have a good position to place them. However, because it led the mutiny this time, Al-Shabaab has a good reputation in the military and is able to control the army. At present, people in Al-Shabaab have nothing to do. Controlling the army is the most important thing for them. Therefore, Ahmad Rizal and Sabar al-Din, who have not yet been raised up, are responsible for this aspect. Hi, Rizza, how have you been these days? You'll know just by looking at me. I've been doing this in the office, even while sleeping these days. After a brief greeting, Rizza waited for the secretary to bring the coffee. After taking a sip, Rizza looked at the two people in front of him and asked, "Tell me, what do you want from me this time?" Faced with Rizza's inquiry, the two looked at each other, and then Ahmad Rizza spoke. "I came here mainly to inform you that our contact with Marshal Nuri Pasha was not smooth, and he was not willing to publicly express his support for us." What? The two men said, is exactly what Al-Shabaab needs urgently at present. For them, mastering the army is the key to survival. Otherwise a group of reactionaries can tear them apart. Among them, if the respected old marshal can support them, it will be a huge surprise. This will allow them to take the army into their hands in a shorter time and faster. Although the old marshal was knocked down from the altar in the previous war, at least for now, most officers and soldiers respect him very much. But it is a pity that this man is a loyal supporter of the Sultan, and young people like them cannot make him change his mind at all, and they are not beaten out by the old marshal's cane, because he is well educated. To put it in their angry words, this old stubborn man whose mind was filled with loyalty to the Sudan was as if he had been thrown into the toilet, smelly and hard, comparable to the most stubborn person. And they can't touch him, which is disgusting. After hearing Lisa's words, Rizza shook his head with regret and said, "This is such a pity. I originally wanted to appear in public with the marshal, to boost the morale of the people." Although he said this regretfully, Rizza immediately changed the topic. "Although the marshal does not understand us, I believe that as time goes by, he will see our sincerity." Hearing that Rizza still had some hope for Marshal Nuri Pasha, the two didn't know what to say. Rizza seemed to notice the emotional changes between the two of them and said directly, "We should respect the marshal. No matter what, he has made great contributions to the Ottoman Empire, so we should respect him. No matter what his attitude is towards us, at least the majority of officers and soldiers can see it." At this time, the two of them could not understand what he meant, so they immediately nodded and said, "Don't worry, we will not let the marshal be wronged." After watching the two people answer with satisfaction, Rizza changed his sitting position and continued to ask, "So what else do you want? It's gone, so we won't bother you." After saying that, the two of them were about to stand up, but at this time Rizza looked at them. "No, the marshal matter is not worthy of the two of you. There must be something going on." Rizza's words immediately made the two of them feel awkward, and Rizza immediately denied it. "Really do not have. Really do not have. We'll just..." As Rizza was answering, he saw Rizza's sharp eyes staring at him, and he couldn't speak anymore. The office immediately fell into an awkward atmosphere. Sabadin couldn't stand it anymore, so he broke away from Lisa, who was holding him, and said, "Party leader, there is indeed something else, and it is a big matter." "What's the matter? Tell me." Faced with Rizza's inquiry, Sabahaddin said directly, "Actually, this time we come here, we want to ask if you will continue to fight." Hearing Sabahaddin's words, Rizza looked surprised. "Why do you ask?" Faced with Rizza's inquiry, Sabahaddin said hesitantly, Because they said that after you ascended to a high position, you have forgotten our mission." Sabahaddin's words made Rizza's face darken. He thought of a lot at this moment. Sabahaddin, who saw the change in Rizza's expression, quickly explained, "Don't get me wrong, I don't think so. No, otherwise you wouldn't ask me in person." After replying, Rizza looked at the other party with a serious expression. "Sabahaddin, now tell me honestly, how many people have such thoughts in the military camp?" Sabahaddin, who was frightened by Rizza's expression, shook his head and said, "Not too much. Not too much. Give me a specific number." "Probably about a third." Hearing This, Riza was so angry that he almost wanted to curse, but that wasn't enough. Immediately afterwards, Sabadin explained quickly, I have asked people to investigate this rumor. According to the investigation, it was originally spread from the 39th and 52nd divisions. After hearing Sabar al-Din's words, Riza immediately recalled the information of 2 divisions in his mind. These 2 divisions were recruited from Balu and Karabakh, and these 2 places were particularly loyal to the Sudan. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but glance at the location of the palace. It seemed that His Majesty the Sultan did not intend to sit still and wait for death. However, despite the speculation, Riza does know that there is currently a solution, and that is to restart the war. It seems that some people think that their own interests are more important than the country. Although he made some guesses, going to war has now become his only option. In this case, he can only give it a try. Tell those officers who are wondering that I was just delaying time so that we could be better prepared, and let them wait patiently for 3 days. If I can't do anything after 3 days, then I will resign myself. Both of them were shocked when they heard Riza's decisive words. Party leader, needless to say, this war is related to the future of Al-Shabaab and the fate of the Ottomans. I hope everyone will work hard. What else could the 2 of them say? They could only accept Riza's words. 3 days later, it was exactly as Riza said. The new Ottoman government refused to sign the agreed terms. Their reason is that this was negotiated by the corrupt and incompetent previous government, and they will never accept it. However, in expressing such decisive words, the new Ottoman government also left a hole. That is, the Ottomans do not accept the division of territory, but in a humanitarian spirit, they are willing to provide assistance of 100 million Ottoman riza to other participating countries as the Ottomans refuse to sign the agreed terms. War once again enveloped the Balkans. As for whether it will expand accordingly, no one knows. Chapter 245 Race Against Time. Hurry, everyone, keep up. On the rugged mountain road, a group of Italian officers and soldiers were rushing forward under the scorching sun under the command of an officer. Sweat had already wet their military uniforms on the mountain, and water vapor had been emitted from the military caps. Every officer and soldier was panting as they ran. Carrying rifles and luggage, they were walking quickly through the mountains. Major Vic, the guide said, we are about 21 kilometers ahead of Chukovica. The panting Vic, who was also running with his subordinates, heard the news brought back by the messenger, and immediately felt the breath in his chest relax. Let the team stop and rest for 15 minutes to relax a little. The messenger who received the officer's order immediately went down to convey the order. After a while, he heard statements one after another. The battalion commander ordered everyone to rest for 15 minutes. The battalion commander ordered everyone to rest for 15 minutes. As this order was conveyed, the team immediately stopped, and then a group of officers and soldiers collapsed on the ground without any image. Many people picked up the kettle and started to drink it in small sips. After drinking the water, sweat came out in streams, as if they had fallen into the water. Don't sit still. Stand up and move around, otherwise you won't be able to walk for a while. Experienced veterans and officers kept explaining their experiences to these soldiers who sat down and refused to get up. Seeing that his soldiers were extremely tired, and considering that there was still plenty of time, the considerate Vic thought for a while and ordered, the break will be extended by 10 minutes. The break will be extended by 10 minutes. The break will be extended by 10 minutes. As his orders continued to be passed on, there was a burst of cheers from the resting officers and soldiers. No one can refuse that. After walking dozens of miles of mountain roads, there is not enough rest time, and some people even want to take a nap. The soldiers could rest, but Vic could not rest. He took out a military map from his bag and summoned the company and platoon leader of the team. Look, everyone, this is the town of Chukovica, our first target. According to intelligence, there are 2 companies of Ottoman troops here. This time we are traveling lightly and without heavy weapons, so the battle must be fast, not give the enemy time to react. So after walking out of the mountain for a while, we will arrest all the pedestrians on the road and let them go when we arrive at Chukovica. This is especially true for Dyer and your 9th company, Vic. Sid at the end. He also named the 9th Pioneer Company. The baby-faced Lieutenant Dyer immediately assured, "Don't worry, Battalion Commander. I will never let a passerby escape." Faced with Dyer's assurance, Vic was still relieved, because even though the other person had a tender face, he did things the most appropriate way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked Julian to be the vanguard. Then Vic assigned some other tasks and precautions. The young officers present listened carefully to the battalion commander's instructions. Time passed quickly, and soon it was time to set off. With the shouts coming and going, the resting soldiers could only stand up again. Under the leadership of their respective commanders, they continued to move towards their destinations 20 kilometers behind them. Most of the Army's 41st Division was slowly passing through the mountains. A large number of officers and soldiers lined up in a long queue and meandered forward. Behind them, the artillery and logistics carriages and artillery were constantly moving, driven by the accumulation of energy and manpower, although the speed was not as fast as those marching in front. Infantry, but not too slow. However, Colonel Cassiper, the commander of the 41st Division, was not satisfied with the speed of the marching team at all. "It's too slow. This speed is too slow. It only takes 1.5 hours to walk 5 kilometers. It is difficult to meet the requirements of the Chief of General Staff at this speed." Faced with the dissatisfaction of his partner, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy, the Chief of Staff of the 41st Division, understood his mood very well, but rapid marching in mountainous areas has always been a problem for all countries. Our speed is already good. The mountain roads are complicated, and it is impossible to pass quickly. At present, our progress is considered good. At least we have gone halfway. The 48th Division next door has only gone 1/3. The words of his chief of staff did not dispel Colonel Cassiper's sorrow. He only saw him speaking. "Chief of Staff, I'm not thinking about the present, but the future." Upon hearing Colonel Cassiper's words, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy was silent for a while, and then said slowly, "This kind of thing, now I wonder if it is too far away. How could it be so far? We have talked about it before. Our 41st Division had no chance to perform in the previous battle. If it cannot perform well this time, then after the war is over, things will be very clear." What kind of riddle are the two chief officers of the 41st Division playing? In fact, they were not playing riddles, but talking about the future of the 41st Division. The 41st Division can be seen from their numbers. This is a newly formed division before the war. This era is not the type where the numbers are very large in later generations. Basically, you can tell from their numbers that this division, the quality of the troops, at least you can definitely tell whether it's a new one or not. This kind of division newly formed before the war will basically end up being disbanded after the war, except for a few personnel who are absorbed into other units. As long as the others are killed on the battlefield, they will continue to do what they originally did in the future. Of course, there are exceptions. Those troops that fight very well will be retained by the army. And Colonel Cassiper had exactly this idea. He has his own ambitions and does not want to be inactive for the rest of his life because he is already in his early 50s. If you can't achieve outstanding results, you will face the end of quitting the army. For Colonel Cassiper, who had spent most of his life in the army, this was unacceptable. Therefore, this war was his last chance. In order to make his military career colorful, he wanted to make enough contributions. At least he must be called a general before he retires. However, it is not easy to become a general. You must know that Italy currently maintains an army of 300,000 people all year round, and the number of its generals is only close to over 100. It can be said that every general has its own outstanding performance. And a large number of school-level officers like him were stuck in the position of colonel, unable to achieve breakthroughs. So this time, it is completely normal for Colonel Cassiper to have his own plans. While Colonel Cassiper was fighting for his future, the main force of the Balkan army led by General Cadorna was also in action. However, compared to concealing their partial masters, their movements are much greater. He led the Balkan army starting from Prilep and heading towards Kospri, the most important city in Macedonia, because basically all the Ottoman troops are currently gathered here. They need to keep an eye on their opponents and create opportunities for their side. Chapter 246, the development of the war. As the Italian army moves, Bulgaria and Montenegro Two important allies are also making preparations in Adrianople. A total of 168,000 people from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Bulgarian armies gathered here to confront the 210,000 Ottoman army led by the new Ottoman Minister of War Hamid Reza. That's right. It's a confrontation. Although both sides are very cautious about large-scale decisive battles, they both try to solve each other. After gaining an advantage point on the Ottoman side, the main consideration is that, although they currently have the advantage in terms of strength, they have too many new recruits, and a prolonged battle can easily trigger a chain reaction. Although Macedonia still has nearly 200,000 troops besieged, this matter cannot be rushed. If the reinforcement are defeated, they will be even more desperate. In addition, the Ottoman side also has a little thought, that is, the continuous recruitment of new soldiers in its country. Although the Ottoman mobilization efficiency is not high, the more than 20 million people are not something Bulgaria can compete with. If it takes a little time, their troops will become more and more concentrated. The more, until they have an absolute advantage in strength. As for the Bulgarian side, it goes without saying that their purpose is only to delay the opponent, not to defeat the opponent. They are willing to wait, because after all, they can get reinforcement from Italy and Montenegro after Macedonia is solved. So the two sides faced each other in Adrianople, while reinforcing their positions, trying to wait for the opportunity. Whether the Ottomans waited until their forces were overwhelmed, or whether Bulgaria waited for reinforcement after Macedonia was solved, it depends on which of the two is faster. The movements of the Italian Balkan army fighting in Macedonia are extremely critical. They need to deal with Macedonia's enemies early, before they can reinforce the main Bulgarian force and defeat the last Ottoman military force. I believe that at that time, the Ottomans will know how costly it is to break the contract. Although this task is demanding, and time is not sufficient, the three countries still have an unspoken agreement, which is to isolate the Serbian and Greek armies from the war zone. In the south, the Bulgarian Third Army left a division of troops along the Ariakamang River, to keep the Greek army out of Macedonia. Although this only has the strength of one division, as long as the Greeks are not stupid, they will know that they will not be able to reap the benefits of being involved. As for the north, the Bulgarian army dispatched from the country has seized the valley section of the upper reaches of the Morava River, isolating Serbia from Macedonia, making it impossible for it to follow this most convenient road to the east of Macedonia. As for the other passage through Kosovo, with 3 Italian divisions working overtime to attack, nearly half of Kosovo has fallen into Italian hands. Moreover, Italy has also issued a warning that anyone who is not an Italian army in Kosovo will be ruthlessly attacked. It is self-evident to whom this sentence is addressed. When Italy and other countries were targeting Serbia and Greece, they did not just give in. Although they did not dare to send troops across the border, they could still do it with a small move in private. This is especially effective when seeking help from the supporting powers behind it. Your Majesty Carlo, our country is deeply puzzled by your country's practice of excluding Serbia and Greece from the war. Whether your country's approach in this matter is appropriate, please consider it carefully. In the palace in Rome, the British ambassador to Rome Fulham expressed Britain's dissatisfaction to King Carlo with a serious face. Facing the British challenge, Carlo, the King of Italy, smiled and said, "That's it, Your Excellency Ambassador. Since Italy and Secchi have not had much contact before, when faced with Osman's sudden repentance, we must let him know the consequences of his repentance as quickly as possible. So we can only use the plan was drawn up before. Since the two countries are willing to contribute to this, I will ask the military to formulate a plan for the two countries to participate. Once we have the plan formulated, we will send it to the two countries." Carlo's words are obviously shirk. When the plan is formulated, the war will probably be over. What else will happen between the two countries at this time? So when faced with Carlo's words, Ambassador Fulham said directly after sighing, "Your Majesty, there is no need to bother. As long as your country agrees to send troops from Serbia and Greece, they will obey your command. After all, your country has no disputes with them, and still maintains goodwill towards Italy and Italy." For Ambassador Fulham to say such a thing, the two countries were anxious. Although the two countries took some advantage in the first phase of the war, as the war resumed, the two countries were directly excluded from the war. This means that they have no chance to speak at all in the subsequent negotiations, so, in order to get an excuse to get to the negotiating table in the future, they would rather put their troops under Italian command. However, in the face of the requests from Serbia and Greece, Carlo was not interested at all. No matter how good Italy is to these two countries, it can be compared to Britain and Russia behind it. In this case, why should they offend Bulgaria, which is currently performing very well? So faced with Ambassador Fulham's words, Carlo didn't answer. Please wait until I discuss this with the military before I can give an answer to this question. After all, the situation on the battlefield is ever changing, and I need to respect the military's opinions. This was another word of evasion. After seeing that the Italians were not willing to intervene between the two countries, Ambassador Fulham could only do nothing about it. Who is to blame for the Ottomans themselves? The British Empire negotiated such generous terms for them, but they were so ignorant of their painstaking efforts now. Unless the British Empire intervenes directly, this war will inevitably end in Ottoman defeat. But why did the British Empire intervene? It was to prevent Russian forces from entering the Mediterranean. But now, in order to prevent Ottoman from losing too much blood, the British Empire had already intervened once, and it was impossible to do it again. The British Empire's face was not so easy to betray. If the Greeks hadn't begged for help this time, Ambassador Fulham might not have paid a visit. It's all the damn Ottomans' fault, especially those ignorant Al-Shabaab. After seeing off the British ambassador, Carlo couldn't help but smile. This sudden move by the Ottomans made the countries running for him so angry that they wanted to hit them, but this was a good thing for Italy. This kind of thing is rare to come across, so this was an unexpected surprise. Just when Carlo was lamenting this great opportunity for Italy, the captain of the guard, Filmaki, hurried in with a telegram. Your Majesty, this is a secret message from Istanbul. Someone is secretly selling a batch of arms to the Ottomans. What? Chapter 247. The Russians' little moves. Facing the secret message sent by the captain of the guard, Carlo read it as quickly as possible. This is the news detected by Italy's intelligence network in Istanbul. It shows that an arms dealer named Uriolov sold a large number of arms to the Ottoman Empire. How big is this batch of arms? The telegram shows that this batch of arms is worth up to 50 million Ottoman liras, with a total of 87,000 Burton rifles, nearly 100 artillery pieces of various types, and some other military supplies. You can tell who sent this batch of arms at a glance. There are so many Russian weapons. Unexpectedly, the Russians were able to export arms to Ottoman in order to prevent Ottoman from suffering too much loss. Seeing this, Carlo couldn't help but cursed. These damn Russians. At this time, Carlo's mind came to the words of Russian ambassador Fedorovsky when he visited him before. Your Majesty Carlo, since Russia is not enough to attract your country's attention, please look forward to the following. Unexpectedly, the following is here. As for the arms dealer named Uriolov, it is obviously just an excuse in order to give Russia an extra layer of identity and avoid causing domestic dissatisfaction. After all, this is what arms dealers do, and it has nothing to do with the Russians thinking of this. Carlo immediately said, call the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and let others test the attitude of the Austro-Hungarian Empire to see if its attitude changes. Although the small actions of the Russians were not enough to scare Carlo, the changes in their attitudes meant that Italy must pay attention. As for asking about the attitude of the Austro-Hungarians, it is very easy to understand. The country is an ally with Italy. If their attitude changes, then this will also mean that the Three Kingdoms alliance, which has made Italy a lot of profits, has loosened. This is card. Luo definitely didn't want to see it. Regarding Carlo's order, the captain of the guard, who knew the seriousness of the matter, immediately responded, I'll do it right away. With Carlo's order, the already intense diplomatic situation became even more exciting. In Vienna, Count Konocki, the foreign minister and president of the Council of Ministers, received the Italian ambassador. Your Excellency Banks, your country also knows our country's attitude towards this Balkan war. We are not willing to see the local people in ruins, so we hope that your country can end this war as soon as possible. Being able to allow Count Konocki to receive the Italian ambassador despite his busy schedule fully demonstrates the importance Austria-Hungary attaches to Italy. although its current main experience is in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has just gained legal rights. Austria-Hungary is also paying a lot of attention to the ongoing war. However, what he said made Ambassador Banks feel frightened, because Austria-Hungary's previous attitude was to support Italy's actions, but on the issue of Bulgaria, it opposed its occupation of Macedonia. Although it has not yet expressed clear opposition. Its vague position itself means that Austria-Hungary's attitude has changed. Faced with this new situation, Ambassador Banks tried to save it. Your Excellency is right. Our country also wants to end this damn war as soon as possible. If the Ottomans hadn't torn up the results of the peace talks themselves, then we wouldn't have to fight them anymore. Banks tried to put all the blame on Osman, but who was Count Carnocki? How could he be distracted by such a little trick? He said directly and clearly, although it was the Ottomans who were at fault this time, our country hopes to restore peace as soon as possible, especially in South Macedonia and East Thrace. This is not only what our country wants to see, but also what all countries want to see. It is obvious that the words of Count Carnocki represent the attitude of Austria-Hungary. They hope that the ambitions of Italy and Bulgaria will not affect Southern Macedonia and Eastern Thrace. Banks heard what Count Carnocki said clearly, but this matter was not something he could decide as a small ambassador. I need to report this issue to Rome. Please don't mind me. It doesn't matter. You can take my words to your government. The change in attitude towards Austria-Hungary was sent back to Rome by Banks, and Carlo immediately attracted attention. After thinking about it, Carlo called the Prime Minister. Tell the Bulgarians about the export of arms from Austria-Hungary and Russia to the Ottomans. Let them know that our current situation is not good. Although Carlo didn't say it clearly, Depretis could still feel a slight change in the king's attitude. It seems that it is no longer possible for Italy to gain more from this war against the Ottomans. Your Majesty wants the Bulgarians to stand up on their own. Although he had some guesses, Depretis still decided to speak to make sure. No, this is just our country seeking the opinions of the Bulgarians. Our country respects them very much for this. After all, Bulgaria will be needed next, so Carlo doesn't plan to make it too obvious. Since Italy is an ally of Bulgaria, it is better to share the pressure. However, Italy has no interest in Macedonia at all, so it is up to Bulgaria to fight for how much it can get. After knowing Carlo's attitude, Depretis already knew what to do. Next, he sent all the intelligence recently received by Italy and the changes in the attitudes of various countries to the Bulgarians. This is not because Italy, the big brother, does not support you, but there is currently a lot of pressure from the outside. If you want to achieve more results, you Bulgaria need to stand up. So, when the Italian telegram was sent to Sofia, the Bulgarians immediately felt the pressure. In the Palazzo Brana in Sofia, a discussion about the Italian telegram officially began. Your Majesty, Prime Minister, the telegram sent from Italy this time shows that if our country continues to expand, it will attract intervention from various countries. At this point, our country needs to think carefully. The first person to speak was Bulgarian Foreign Minister Popkov. He was the most anxious about the telegram from Italy, because this would mean that Bulgaria would be isolated by other countries, especially since Russia secretly provided weapons to the Ottomans, which made him feel heavy pressure. He did not say anything at the meeting, mainly because of the impact it would have on Bulgarian politics. In fact, everyone present had seen this telegram, and they were very helpless about the Russians' drifting away attitude. The country of Bulgaria was founded with the help of Russia, and they have very deep feelings for Russia. Otherwise, Russian officers would not have been commanding the Bulgarian army before. However, with the spread of nationalism, the interests of Bulgaria and Russia conflicted, so the two countries later broke up due to the issue of the throne. However, despite the break, there are still strong pro-Russian factions in Bulgaria, and this Italian telegram was a huge blow to the pro-Russian faction. However, Popkov's choice of tolerance made many people dissatisfied. Especially the hardliners represented by the military are the most dissatisfied. Your Excellency, Foreign Minister, you are not unaware of the feelings between our country and the Macedonian people. In this case, you let the frontline soldiers who fought bloody battles know that we lost the opportunity to unify the entire Macedonian region, which will trigger a huge conflict. Sensation. This is not a good thing for the government and the military. The speaker was Major General Nikolaev, Chief of General Staff of the Bulgarian Army. Bulgaria's current military leader bluntly pointed out the difficulties involved. Yes, countries in the Balkans are currently vigorously encouraging nationalism, and Serbia and Bulgaria are the most serious among them. There are many fanatical nationalists in the two countries. Although these people can promote Bulgaria to unite, they are not the same. The characteristics of a double-edged sword also lead to its inability to take a step back. Faced with the difficulties expressed by Major General Nikolaev, Prime Minister Stambolov felt the need to stand up. Major General Nikolaev, I'm also aware of the situations you mentioned, but for our country, this harvest is enough to shut them up. If Bulgaria wants to digest the results stably, it must consider the attitudes of other countries. And this telegram from Italy is not a warning. They are warning us not to be too greedy, otherwise we will not even have a friend. Think about the fate of the Russians in the Crimean War. Our country does not have the strength of Russia. Faced with a warning from the powerful Prime Minister of Bulgaria, Major General Nikolaev finally stopped talking. Of course he had also seen this telegram about the Russians selling Ottoman arms, and he knew what it meant. After seeing that the military with the toughest attitude was suppressed, Prime Minister Stambolov continued. Let's think about it from another angle. Being able to obtain the Central Macedonia region is an unexpected surprise for our country. Our next job is to implement this surprise, and we cannot waste this God-given opportunity. His words revived the atmosphere at the scene. Yes, being able to get Central Macedonia unexpectedly is already very good for them. Although it has not yet obtained complete Macedonia, at least Bulgaria has stood out from the Balkan countries. Although it is not as strong as its neighbor Romania, it has far surpassed the direct competitors of Serbia and Greece. After turning the atmosphere around, Prime Minister Stambolov breathed a sigh of relief. Only King Ferdinand, who was sitting on the throne, watched the scene quietly. Chapter 248. The situation changes drastically. Although Bulgaria and Italy are under tremendous pressure from various countries, the two countries still need to prioritize solving the battlefield situation. After all, as the saying goes, what you can't get on the battlefield, you can't get at the negotiation table. In Pristina, the most important city in Kosovo, the smoke of war has just dissipated. The 17,000-strong Ottoman garrison surrendered to the Italian army after losing hope. Your Excellency, please accept my command knife. Ottoman, the commander of the garrison at the time, handed over his command knife representing power outside the city gate, and behind him was a row of grey-looking Ottoman officers. Colonel Kasapa, who was in a good mood, took the command knife with a smile on his face. Please rest assured that our army will arrange your troops in accordance with the Geneva Convention. As long as they do not violate the treaty, all their living habits and personal and property safety will be protected. Hearing the assurance given by Colonel Kasapa, the Ottoman commander breathed a sigh of relief. The morale of his side was low, and he was no match for the Italians. It was a helpless move for them to be forced to surrender, and they hoped that Italy would abide by what they said. Not to mention Colonel Kasapa, being able to get the city's defenders to surrender means that Italy has basically taken control of Kosovo. It was also his luck. As the first Italian army to rush into Kosovo, Colonel Kasapa was prepared to fight a bloody battle with the Ottoman army and then defeat the enemy's positions unexpectedly. There were no enemies along the way. After asking around, I found out that the enemies were all concentrated in Pristina. He thought that the Ottoman army would fight him to the death here, but when he arrived here, he did not expect that what greeted his troops was not a hail of bullets, but enemies with white flags. This opportunity was a complete surprise for him. After meeting the enemy's surrender representatives, Colonel Kasapa, who heard that the other party did not make any excessive demands, made a prompt decision and immediately accepted the enemy's surrender, which is why the scene just happened. Now that the enemy has surrendered, taking over the city from its hands has become an urgent task. In addition, the enemy also needs to take care of it. These are all important things. So under his arrangement, the 1st Brigade and the 2nd Regiment to which he belonged were responsible for the defense of the city, and the 1st Regiment was responsible for guarding the prisoners. As for the 2nd Brigade, they continued to march towards the border. They would be responsible for guarding the border between Kosovo and Serbia after territorial expansion. In case these people are not clear-headed, point of course, the most important thing is to report the good news to the army commander, General Cardona. How could Colonel Cassipa be negligent? He immediately arranged for a team of messengers to report the good news to him day and night. Thanks to the efforts of the messenger, the news was known to General Cardona the next morning. The commander of the Balkan army, who had just arrived at Svitino, 37 kilometers outside Skopje, said happily after seeing the telegram, "This news is great. It is a heavy blow to the enemy." Immediately informed the entire army of the news to let them know that the enemy is facing collapse. What makes General Cardona so happy is not only that Kosovo was quickly resolved, but also the reason why the current battle against Skopje is not going well. Although Italy's Balkan army is currently only responsible for containing the enemy, it still needs to attack the enemies who are stationed there. However, the attack was very unsuccessful. The Balkan army launched several attacks, but was blocked by the Ottoman army, and could not obtain any productive progress. This made General Cardona feel shameless, but considering that the number of enemies stationed around Skopje was not less than his own, it was better to wait until other troops arrived before attacking. It would be difficult to defeat the enemy with just one's own strength. The peaceful settlement of Kosovo is excellent news for him. Just as General Cardona, the Italian commander, was happy about this, General Yilmaz, the commander of the Ottoman army in Skopje, was furious. A treason. Do you know treason? These cowardly guys will be judged morally and legally when they return to the country in the future. How dare they surrender like this without firing a shot? How dare they? In his office, Admiral Cardona roared, and his roar could still be heard through the heavy door. The other Ottoman officers did not dare to go there at this time, fearing that they would become the target of the angry general, so they could only wait outside. At this time, the crowd around them suddenly stopped being separated, and a tall middle-aged man with the rank of lieutenant general walked over. The other officers breathed a sigh of relief. The Chief of Staff is here. That's good. Yes, only Lieutenant General Emmanuel can appease the angry lion. That's right. The person appearing in front of them now is Lieutenant General Emmanuel, the current Chief of Staff of the Macedonian Army. The Ottoman army in Macedonia was reorganized before. The 1st and 2nd Macedonian Army and other Ottoman armies in Macedonia were all organized into a very large group army. Cardona, hurry up and open the door. I heard your voice outside the headquarters, Lieutenant. General Emmanuel has such a special way of calling the door, which is why other officers can say that he is the only one who can appease this lion. Sure enough, the crowd was not disappointed. As Lieutenant General Emmanuel called the door, the roar in the room subsided. Then the door was opened, and Lieutenant General Emmanuel walked in. Seeing the mess in the room, as if it had been swept by a typhoon, Lieutenant General Emmanuel couldn't help but ask, "Yo, what's going on, Admiral?" Cardona sat back in his chair, picked up a cigarette, and smoked it and replied, "It's nothing. I was in a bad mood just now. For Kosovo. Why else? It's just that I don't know people well." Having said this, Admiral Cardona took a deep puff and pressed the cigarette butt hard into the ashtray, as if what he was holding was not a cigarette, but an Ottoman commander who surrendered in Kosovo. Faced with Admiral Cardona's actions, Lieutenant General Emmanuel turned a blind eye and said instead, "None of us want to see this kind of thing, but now that it has happened, we can only accept it. I have said before that the Kosovo area is not suitable for deploying troops, although it makes us look like the area is larger and there is room for maneuver, but in effect splitting the army into two poorly connected parts." Faced with the scolding from the Chief of Staff, Cardona didn't want to talk about this issue anymore and asked immediately, "Then what should we do next?" Chapter 249. The city of Skopje in trouble. Ignore what is happening in Kosovo and continue to wait for Istanbul's rescue. After saying this, Lieutenant General Emmanuel explained, "Although our army currently has nearly 200,000 people, it is currently in a deadlock, and it is impossible to break out. We are at least 500 kilometers away from East Thrace, and there is no way to retreat along the way. I think the previously customized plan does not need to be modified at all." Lieutenant General Emmanuel, who knew Admiral Cardona very well, persuaded him hard, because he knew that what his chief officer had just said had somewhat shaken his determination. to stick to it point. In fact, it has been more than a day or two since General Cadorna wanted to retreat. He had this idea after Bulgaria declared war, but giving up the vast Balkan territory was simply impossible to accept. Then Istanbul strictly ordered him to stick to it and let him perform his functions. Watching the situation gradually deteriorate point from Bulgaria blocking the coastal passage to the Italians breaking through the Second Army's interception and entering the Macedonian region, he was trapped here step by step point. Before that, he could only collect various supplies to prevent himself from running out of ammunition and food. Of course, what happened next became clear to everyone. They originally thought that the war would end after the peace talks, but unexpectedly a mutiny broke out in the capital, causing the war to spread again. And he was surrounded by enemies and couldn't leave point. After thinking about it for a while, Admiral Cadorna took a deep breath and only answered, "It seems like this is the only way, since the Ottoman army chose to stay in Skopje, it must bear the corresponding consequences." As Kosovo was captured by Italy, other parts of Macedonia also fell one after another. The 5th Bulgarian Army, which started from the country, crossed over the lower Bulgarian mountains, and entered the Macedonian region. They first captured Kranjska Panica near the Bulgarian border, and then continued to press towards Skopje from the east point. As for the north, after capturing Kosovo, 2 Italian divisions joined the Montenegrin army of more than 10,000 people, and launched an attack on Kačanik at the Shah Pass. If you add in the Italian Balkan army located on the southwest side of Skopje, Skopje can be considered to be surrounded from all sides in just 2 or 3 days for a time. The flames of war came from all sides, putting heavy pressure on the opposing Ottoman army that was stationed in Skopje. Fire in the Vardar Valley. On the artillery position outside the valley, an artillery commander was loudly ordering the artillery to fire point. Following his order, the artillery on the artillery position behind him roared one after another. This is not an ordinary division level artillery, but the treasure of the army, the heavy artillery of the Independent Heavy Artillery Regiment. These long-range howitzers with a caliber up to 150mm are currently a powerful support weapon for the Italian Balkan army. These were all transported by sea and were mainly prepared to deal with the enemy's heavy concentration of troops. The current Italian 150mm howitzer is an improved version, after acquiring technology from Krupp and combining it with Italy's national conditions. Its gun weighs 3.4 tons, 26 times the barrel length, has an effective range of 9,800 meters, and has a shell weight of 42.7 kilograms and a muzzle velocity of 150mm 351 meters per second per minute. Is currently the main suppressive heavy firepower of the Italian army. Of course, although the gun is a bit heavy, it is excellent in all other aspects, so the military is still very satisfied with it. In 3 years, 78 guns were built and equipped with 2 heavy artillery regiments. The attack on Skopje was the first time the gun appeared on the battlefield. In previous battles in the mountains of Albania, the gun was not involved because it was too heavy. Boom boom boom. As artillery shells continued to explode on the garrison positions, the power from the heavy artillery caused the Ottomans to suffer. The Ottoman army, which had only simple trench breastworks and other field fortifications as protection, suffered heavy losses in the shelling point. At this time, European countries had not conducted in-depth research on trenches. Many of the current trenches, like breastworks, expose the body above the chest. Although this can also provide good protection against small and medium caliber artillery, it is not suitable for heavy artillery. The attack of this is a bit unsatisfactory point. As long as the cannonballs fall near the fortifications, the Ottoman defenders hiding inside are destined to suffer disaster, ranging from minor injuries to serious death. This is especially terrible for the Ottoman soldiers hiding behind the parapets. The secondary damage caused by a large number of stones or broken wood made Ottoman officers and soldiers avoid things like breastworks like snakes and scorpions. Since the Italian artillery is constantly harvesting the lives of the defenders, why don't the defenders' artillery fight back? It is pitiful to say that the artillery currently on the Ottoman garrison positions are all small and medium caliber light artillery. Its maximum caliber is only 80mm, and its maximum range is only 7,200 meters. How can this reach Italy's long-range heavy artillery? You must know that this Italian heavy artillery was originally prepared to counter the French army. How could the Ottomans, a technologically backward country, be able to resist this? But if you want to say that there is no one in Skopje that can compete with this artillery, you can't say anything. Currently, the defenders in Skopje have an artillery that can compete with it. The Krupp 210mm heavy cannon has a maximum range of 12,100 meters. It can completely suppress Italian heavy artillery, but the gun is heavier and reaches 4.8 tons. This is not the 1894 Krupp 210mm heavy rapid-fire cannon. Moreover, the Macedonian army currently only has 4 guns in its hands. It is impossible to use them to defend mountainous areas, otherwise they would be disposable items. Therefore, facing the attack of Italian heavy artillery, the Ottoman officers and soldiers could only pray for Allah or God's blessing. There were Christians in the Ottoman army, besides gritting their teeth and persevering. However, spiritual prayer and ostrich methods alone will not work. After all, this thing is very powerful, and you may be selected by the cannonball point. Therefore, after enduring constant shelling, the morale of the defenders became increasingly low. Just when they were about to lose their support, the Italian shelling suddenly stopped. It was not that Allah or God heard their prayers, but that the Italian heavy artillery needed a rest. In case the barrel became red, this was not to scrap a heavy artillery. However, the Ottoman defenders on the position should not be too busy to relax, because the Italian infantry is attacking. Such scenes are not only unique to the Vardar Valley, but also appear on other battlefields. Because this time the army sent over the heavy artillery of the 2 regiments, and in conjunction with the heavy artillery that the Balkan army already had, this gave the Ottoman army a good lesson in heavy artillery bombardment. After the Italian army once again took out its heavy artillery to attack this German magic weapon, the Ottoman uniform position on the periphery was already shaky. From this perspective, it is no exaggeration to say that artillery is the god of war. Chapter 250. The war is accelerating. The offensive and defensive battle in Skopje began in full swing, and while the officers and soldiers of the 2 sides were fighting desperately, Carlo, who was far away in Rome, also had his own problems. However, his difficulty was much less than that of the Italian officers and soldiers who fought bloody battles. Perhaps in the eyes of some people, this is the king making a fuss out of molehill. Is this the change your Department of Transportation is making? Looking at the document in his hand, Carlo looked at Transportation Secretary Pedersen in front of him with an unhappy expression. Pedersen, who was watched by Carlo, secretly complained in his heart. Why did this monarch suddenly become concerned about the Ministry of Transportation and personally review the Ministry of Transportation's rectification plan? There are so many departments, why is your own department directly selected? Although Pedersen couldn't figure it out, he knew what to do now. Facing the anger from the king, he immediately bowed his head and admitted his mistake. I will take this rectification plan back and renegotiate it, and I will definitely come up with a better rectification plan. Facing the old-fashioned Minister of Transport, Carlo coldly put the rectification plan in front of him again. I will wait for the Ministry of Transport's new rectification plan. With Carlo paying so much attention, I don't know whether Pedersen should be grateful or sad. After sending the Secretary of Transportation away, Carlo rubbed his face. During this period, he was even busier than before. Among them, the reason for starting the war with the Ottomans only accounts for a small part. The more reason is that, like the Ministry of Transportation, it needs to review the rectification plans of various departments. The biggest reason why Carlo still insisted on rectifying various departments during the war was that after the war, there were constant mistakes in all aspects of government departments and even the military. Take the military as an example. There are various flaws in various recruitment lists, and even people who have been dead for several years have been recruited. This fully shows that the military is not doing its job well. In addition, there are countless mistakes in material preparation. Take the Ministry of Transportation, which Carlo pointed out and criticized. Delays in railway transportation are now common, and some are even delayed by more than 10 hours. There are many reasons for all this. In addition to various discomforts in facing the sudden increase in tasks, there is also the lack of awareness and thinking of the original personnel. Of course, other departments also have various problems, so I won't list them one by one. As for why the Ministry of Transportation was raised separately, it is also because road traffic plays a huge role in military, economic, and political affairs, whether on weekdays or in emergencies such as wartime. Otherwise, the motherland of later generations would not build a large number of various transportation lines, bringing everyone closer and even allowing them to feel information from the outside world can have a huge effect on them. To put it bluntly, this also makes it easier for the royal government to control everyone and every family. After all, the saying that mountains are high and emperors are far away is not unique to China. Therefore, necessary rectification is also urgent. As for choosing it during wartime, this is better understood. It's not that more time is needed during wartime, but it is easier to cut through the mess quickly. After all, everything is done quickly and urgently during wartime, but the efficiency is better than at other times. Just as Carlo was preparing to continue attacking government departments, the captain of the guard hurried in. "Your Majesty, the Ottomans in Adrianople have taken action." Carlo was extremely surprised by Feremich's words. "When did it start?" "Just this morning. This is a telegram from our frontline advisors in Bulgaria." Although Carlo didn't know much about military affairs, he also knew that the battle in Adrianople was very important to Italy. Carlo took the telegram and read it immediately. In the telegram, the Italian consultant from Adrianople described the scene of the war in detail. At about 7 o'clock this morning, the Ottoman army from Adrianople launched a large-scale artillery bombardment, and the heavy artillery fire shrouded the Bulgarian position. Although the Bulgarians built a position, this time the Ottomans seemed to have mobilized all the artillery in the country. Although the number of artillery in the Ottoman army was not too many, there were many heavy artillery among them. The experienced Italian consultant heard the whistling sound of artillery shells with a caliber of over 100 mm. He could put his hand on the Bible and swear that it was definitely a heavy artillery with a caliber of more than 300 mm. Although the Ottoman army was not equipped with such a huge cannon, considering that it had introduced heavy coastal defense artillery, it is obvious where it came from. These Ottomans were so bold that they dismantled the coastal defense guns that defended Istanbul and brought them over. Aren't they afraid that the Italian fleet will break into the strait and bombard Istanbul? Although I don't know what ability Osman has, he dares to do this. But the effect is indeed very obvious. Although the rate of fire of this heavy artillery is impressive, its power is quite high. Basically, with one shot, most of the people within the football field will be killed or injured. Such a powerful bombardment naturally frightens people, and no one can remain calm in the face of such a powerful heavy artillery bombardment. Fortunately, the rate of fire of such a heavy artillery is impressive. The ability to fire one shot per minute is due to the well-trained Ottoman artillery. In addition, there are only 2 of these guns on the front line, and a number of other Ottoman heavy artillery with a caliber of 150 mm or above is also scarce, so the Bulgarian army bites. Although it still had some impact, it was not enough to cause his morale to collapse under the bombardment. With the end of the bombardment and the appearance of Ottoman infantry, the morale of the Bulgarian army began to recover. Yes, you read that right. The morale of the Bulgarian defenders increased under the impact of the Ottoman infantry. The main reason for this spectacle is the current lack of combat effectiveness of the Ottoman army in Adrianople. At present, the well-trained Ottoman troops have either been defeated and annihilated before, or they have been besieged. Especially the more than 100,000 Ottoman troops currently besieged in Macedonia are the absolute elite that they have trained for many years. This has also led to the fact that there are currently nearly 300,000 Ottoman troops in Adrianople, less than 80,000 of whom were pre-war troops, and the rest were temporarily formed after the outbreak of the war. Among them, there are nearly 100,000 new troops that were formed less than a month ago. What can you expect these new recruits to do who can't even shoot a gun? Carlo did not know the actual situation of the Ottoman army, but at least according to this report, Bulgaria blocked the Ottoman attack, which made him relieved. After putting down the telegram, Carlo asked the captain of the guard in front of him, "Has the army received any news already?" "No." "Then, do they have any countermeasures?" "Not yet, but I think the army department should have countermeasures." Feremich was right. The news that the Ottoman army had launched an attack in Adrianople caused the War Department To respond immediately. The 2 divisions originally prepared to seize the island were immediately changed by the War Department and ordered to turn to Salonika. As for whether the reinforcement will support Skopje or Adrianople, this needs to be determined based on the actual situation. As for the Battle of Skopje, that General Cardona is commanding, I believe he definitely received the news earlier than Rome. As for what to do instead, there is no need to remind this battle experienced Chief of General Staff. Sorry everyone, I was a bit rude for not updating in the past few days, because my state is really bad this month and I need to adjust it. I'm not talking about the reasons for my grades. I know this is a problem of my own ability. I will continue to write, insist on finishing the book, and show everyone a completed story. Let's not talk about it anymore. It's important to code words, which has burdened everyone. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.